think we gotta write something in a tweet, right?
I'll do it. I'll take care of that while you're introing.
Yeah, no, we're good. And we're live. So results tonight in North Carolina 9 and North Carolina 3. It's another one of these well planned and well executed live streams tonight. Drew, you want to walk us through what this race is about while we wait for the first results to come in?
Yeah, they should be coming in shortly with the early and absentee votes, but we're here because of election fraud back in 2018. The Republican quote unquote winner, Mark Harris, hired a guy who collected and sort of he went out and he got absentee voter files and brought them to voters, had them fill it out, then collected them. That is voter harvesting in California and a felony in North Carolina. It was a pretty tight race. It was less than 1,000 votes separating Harris from his Democratic competitor who's running again tonight, Mark McCready. And the North Carolina Board of Elections said it was fundamentally unfair and called the question of the fairness of the election into doubt, which is the standard that they can use to fail to certify. So they called for a special election. McCready became the Democratic nominee, stayed there. As I said, Harris did not contest again for the Republican nomination. That became Dan Bishop, who is a state senator from the southwestern part of Mecklenburg County. His district overlaps quite a bit
Drew,
with the. Yeah, we have results.
Noah's got some information. What happened, Noah? We're gonna have to wait another 20 minutes.
So it's going to be about another 25 minutes. One of the polling centers in a precinct's remaining open for the next 25 minutes.
So it looks like we're going to get our first results here in 25 minutes. So, Drew, you've got to talk for a while. Sorry, keep going, man.
That's all right. No, it's good to know. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens on election night, right? Is there are always issues and judges make decisions and we sit around and wait for them. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting situation where what this operative would do, and it was mostly in Bladen County in the eastern end of the district, is, and you guys can probably talk about this, North Carolina has a very open absentee voter system. They provide a list of who has requested them and who has returned them on a daily basis. So what was happening is they could see, here's a list of voters, Republicans, whatever they wanted them to be, who had requested absentee voter ballots in previous elections but hadn't yet. They would then fill out the form, take it to the voter, have them sign it, send it in, and then see if the voter then sent in the absentee that they got. If they didn't, they would go to them. This is where it gets to be a big problem, is the voters would fill it out, and sometimes they didn't send it back. They didn't sign it in front of a witness. And what would happen would be the people at the field staff for this operative would sign and say they witnessed the vote. Well, they didn't. You know, the ballot was already filled out when they got there. So that's a problem, not just with election law, but criminal law. And then they would take the ballots very often and mail them in. They were even doing it from different post office. They would make sure they would go to places that were close to where the actual voter lived, so that didn't start to ring alarm bells. But again, that's illegal in North Carolina. It's not in other states, apparently. But in North Carolina, it is a felony to have somebody else's ballot, an absentee ballot. And so when there was a sufficient number, again, it was they were able to trace about 800, 850. They obviously probably couldn't get them all. But in a race where there were 950 votes separating the candidates, that's a pretty substantial number of the results. So that's why we're here tonight. We also shouldn't forget there's a second special election tonight, North Carolina 3. Just want to jump over there real quick. That was done basically because Walter Jones, a longtime incumbent, passed away in February. It's not expected to be as close as North Carolina 9, simply because it's such a Republican district. Back to North Carolina 9, the candidates. On the, I think the first one we have here is the Democrat, Dan McCready. He is an Iraq veteran, small business owner, never held elective office before. And then his Republican challenger is State Senator Dan Bishop, who's also been in the North Carolina House. Anyway, he was North Carolina House in 2014. He's an attorney, 55 years old, native of the state. So these are the two guys duking it out tonight. It's expected to be pretty close. It's a district that the Republicans should do well in. President Trump carried it by 12%. It was an Obama 2008-2012 district, and one that Trump was able to flip. But in the wave of 2018, the Democrats came very close, very close. So that's what they're going to want to try and do tonight. You can see Republican only won 2 of the 9 counties. But Bladen, as you see down sort of in the lower right-hand corner, is where a lot of those absentees came from. And that was only one of the 2 counties where Harris carried. You guys want to talk a little bit about North Carolina's absentee system and how unusual it is and how operatives can take advantage of that in purely, useful and legal ways?
Yeah. So, and as we're looking at this race, it looks like what happened in 2018 might have had a little bit of an effect on voting absentee versus early this time around. So in this district, most of the early vote comes from what's called one-stop voting, which is basically what you think of as in-person early voting. That made up close to 95% of all the absentee votes cast this time around. Part of the reason why might be last time around what happened with the vote harvesting. So if you have absentee ballots at homes, ballot harvesting is legal, or maybe was legal at this point in this district in North Carolina. And so, as Drew, as you were saying, people would go pick up the ballots home to home, and unfortunately, that lends itself to the fraud that happened last time around. So the vast majority of the early votes that were cast this time were one-stop, in-person early votes.
Real quick, so we've got about 20 minutes before votes close. That's what some people are asking in the chat. Moving over, I'm going to put Noah on the spot. Can we throw up some of the spending so Noah can run us through what he's been tracking? Because this has been a pretty big off-season race. Noah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this has attracted a lot of attention. It's not Georgia 6 levels, where it was about $60 million thrown at it total, but this has seen about $10 million in outside spending. The big discrepancy here is both how the parties are funneling money and what the intent is. So Bishop's a new candidate, but McCready's been there a while. McCready's more well-known. The New York Times live tracker had his he spent a lot in 2018, and so it had his name recognition up about the same as where Harris was knocking out Pittenger. But the big thing here is that the Republicans have really gone negative. So you can see over 80% of their money, and they've spent about 2/3 of the outside cash here, is all negative. And that's mostly driven by the NRCC has spent $2.6 million all negative anti-McCready ads. Congressional Leadership Fund, this is the same breakdown they had overall in 2018, about 90-10 negative. While the more positive ones have been the ones aligned with the House Freedom Caucus that got them through the primary. So the Club for Growth Action, the House Freedom Action, a lot of those have been more positive. So basically there's 3 tiers of spending is the best way to explain it, where there's the NRCC or the DCCC, which you can see here spent $700,000. That's the main party organizations that you can more easily tie back to the party. So a lot of times the messaging you'll be like, oh, this outside group, the National Democrats or the National Republicans are coming in. And so in a district that's more red, the NRCC really can put in a lot of money. The next step is the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the super PAC run by the Speaker or Minority Leader. So it was with Ryan in 2018, now it's with McCarthy, and you can see a lot of spending there. Now, typically that's the House, there's a House majority, there's a separate one, and that's the Democratic one, and it still has to report donors, but it can spend more. This one, you can see the top Democratic spender is what's third removed. So in the Republicans, I know this is confusing, the American Action Network, which didn't spend here, but the House Majority Forward doesn't have to disclose any of their donors. They're just the Democratic super PAC and the shadiest and most far removed. In a district like this, where McCready could get tagged as being a puppet of Pelosi or being too close to the National Democratic Party, it makes sense that there's this remove. But the big thing here is that the big Republican groups are spending negatively. While the and the DCCC is spending negatively. But a lot of the other outside groups, both of the climate ones for the Environmental Defense Fund, the third remove, the House Majority Forward, have really given McCready a boost. And so it'll be an interesting tactic with so split positive negative for the Republicans and then a 72-28 split positive for the Democrats. It could speak to the strategy and which one works better, especially when both of these candidates are known. You're going into an unknown turnout scenario. And the big thing here too, so I've been looking at some of the daily totals. There was really a big anti-McCready blitz in the beginning. So the month of August saw probably about $2.5 million spent on the Republican behalf, and then they went quiet for a bit, and then there was another big burst right at the end of August. A lot of the Democratic spending didn't come until mid-August, and the House Majority Forward only recently spent about $400,000 right at the end. So the Democrats are using the same playbook as 2018. They're more positive than the Republicans were negative, and they're spending later. Typically, the later spending was a coordination between the Democratic super PACs and, say, like Bloomberg. But this is very much a repetition of 2018 more than it is the 2018 special elections in how they're approaching it. And we'll see if it works. It was very hit or miss on districts this Trumpy in 2018. Some of the ones like OK5 flipped. But again, that was a Bloomberg negative ad. Some of the other ones like Cunningham, which are more positive in South Carolina, first worked for them. And then some of the other ones that fell flat. So we'll really be able to see whether the spend early and negative or spend late and positive has the same sort of outcome. And it could give us a hint into what these consultants are thinking for 2020. If a lot of these more leans are seats, even more rural ones where they have to gin up the Republican base, and the Democrats have to more define their own candidate in redder districts, we'll see how these parties are going to approach it, and I think we'll see this pattern happen again and again and again for next cycle. And there should be some charts up hopefully soon.
Yeah, let's go over to the TV spending. Noah, you want to walk us through that? We
Yeah.
had a question from one of the folks at who are watching us on Twitch. Do you think the GOP abandoned Dan Bishop in the last month, or do you think he got the spending he should have had?
I don't think so. This really seemed more to lean on the Congressional Leadership Fund, who also spent later. Their big strategy last time was they didn't put up field offices this time, but their big thing was let's go on TV early. And then the later spending was less, and you can see that it looks less. But it was a lot more, they were doing stuff where it was more direct mail, or it was more field organization. And so it's more of a pivot towards we're not going to blanket the airways as much. Now you know it. Let's see if we can really connect and target these voters. And it could work out different in a special election. In 2018, there was huge turnout. Everyone was involved in it. But in something like Georgia 6, where the airwaves just get bombarded over and over again, being able to reach out and target as many voters as possible could pay off for them here. So I don't think it's abandoned. It's more of a subtle strategy shift. And it could pay off in this sort of district where you have to get the rural voters who are more low turnout out.
Hey, Noah, real quick, we got a question from someone on Twitch. Where do you get this information, and how do we know it's accurate?
This is all on the FEC, so they have to file with the government. Occasionally they lie and get caught, but for the 99.99% or whatever, it's very accurate. I'll tweet it out. I've tweeted out a bunch, but all you have to do is download. There's just a CSV file. And then you can filter it and play around with it, and you can look at like just North Carolina 9. I'll be tweeting that out.
Hey, Drew, there's some people throwing some information around that there's early votes being reported from NBC. Is that what we're seeing? I don't think we're seeing that yet, are we?
I haven't seen that. Let me check and see what we're getting
with our guys, but I wouldn't take any of those numbers to heart until at least 7:55.
No, we haven't gotten any votes in. Just tweeted out on our Decision Desk account that North Carolina State Board of Elections confirmed that there's one precinct rather, and that is holding up everything. So I'm not sure where people are getting numbers from, but it's not from the County Board of Elections or the State Board of Elections.
Gotcha. Hey, can we switch over? So in conjunction with Decision Desk, Optimist has been running not an exit poll for the last 4 days, and the post is now up on Decision Desk HQ. And it's supposed to give us some insight into who these voters are. Alex, you want to run us through it?
Yeah, so we've been pretty busy just asking some of the voters in North Carolina ninth congressional district some of their opinions, who they are. So we're trying to figure them out, and also we are following very closely the fact that the Bishop campaign made the decision to bring both the president and the vice president to the district last night, and so we wanted to ask the voters a handful of questions to see whether or not that was a smart decision. So rather, because a lot of people were saying that, well, this is a district that went 12 percentage points for President Trump nearly 3 years ago, and however, we wanted to check the pulse of the district and see whether or not it was still a Trump district. And so first, I'd tell everybody to check out, open up a third tab, because I assume you have the stream on your first tab. Hopefully you have our embeds on your second tab. Open up a third tab, and also go on DecisionDeskHQ.com, and you can check out the blog post for yourself. But a few things. So first, this is an older electorate. The majority of voters are heavily 55 years or older, and so we can say something. We can say a few things about who those voters are, which there wasn't too much of a split between the ABEV voters, which Alex was talking about earlier, and the election day voters who we expect. So our sample had very heavily above the age of 55 in the sample. And then also if you compare it with the North Carolina state file of ABEV, the median voter's age was 59 years of age. And so it seems to be that both the election day as well as the ABEV voters are a little bit on the older side. Our not exit poll survey also it leans slightly female, and it also included a Democratic plurality based on voter registration. And so we looked at first we looked at voters based on their self-identified political party. So that just means we asked voters, hey, are you a Democrat, a Republican, or neither? But then also we could compare those numbers with what they are actually registered. So North Carolina is a party registration state. So on the file, we know whether or not you are a Republican, Democrat, or unaffiliated, or also some minor parties. And so we can make comparisons. And what we found in looking at the voter registration was that the likely turnout has a plurality of Democratic voters, but there is also a sizable chunk of nonpartisan, unaffiliated voters as well. And so if we could also look at some of our top line data here, and we see that if we break that out based on self-identified, however, Democrats and Republicans are about even. One of the interesting things is there's a major party difference between the ABEV vote as well as the election day vote. In the ABEV vote, we have we will expect there are more Democrats who were participating in the ABEV vote by about a 10-point advantage. However, among those who reported they definitely will vote today, on election day, Republicans, that is by party registration, Republicans had an 11-point advantage. And so we're going to be following those numbers to see whether or not the party registration is highly correlated with whether or not they turned out to vote for Bishop, the Republican, or McCready, the Democrat. And we can continue to kind of walk through, and those who are on election Twitter have seen variations of this ABEV report, but throughout the entirety of the ballot return time frame that we've been tracking, Democrats have outperformed the Republicans for every single day of the ballot return. And so this is as of this chart that's on the screen right now is as of this morning. However, we'll see in the returns fairly soon whether or not those registrations are correlated with someone's vote choice. Alternatively, we wanted to look at the Trump factor in the race. And so first and foremost, we just asked people straight up, will you vote or did you vote in this election to express support for Donald Trump, to express opposition to Donald Trump, or was Trump not a factor? This is a very standard exit poll question, which we included on our not exit poll. And we actually found a plurality of voters voted today to express support for the president. However, about 30% just said that Trump was not a factor. And so if you go back and compare this to the 2018 numbers, the not a factor, the 2018 national midterm numbers, the not a factor is much higher. And so I think I snarkily say in the blog post that if Bishop wins or McCready wins, we will see everyone in the popular press talking about whether or not this was a good night or a bad night for the president. However, we should bear in mind that 30% of the people who turned out to vote today reported to us that they were not voting whether to express support or opposition to the president.
I walk through the crosstabs real quick so everyone can see where it is. It looks like most of you guys are watching on desktop, which is the magic of the internet. We can see all of you. We can even see all of you type us at Twitch. I love it. No one talks to us on Twitter, but everyone in Twitch is throwing us memes, which is awesome. And yes, they're asking why we're not talking about North Carolina 3. Drew, why are we not talking about North Carolina 3?
Because there are no results there either. They're holding off on everything until 7:55, even out of district things.
Right. But also, like, North Carolina 3 is going to be boring.
That'll be a very quick, most likely win for the Republican. It's a deep red seat.
Yeah.
It does look like NBC, a few votes in North Carolina 3 specifically. Not sure where they're getting them, but North Carolina 9 definitely is at 0 across the board at the moment. And that's the more interesting race.
Gotcha. So yeah, you guys can go check out the top lines here, all that kind of fun stuff. Let's switch over just so we can go get it. We had a lot of people throw some stuff about Noah's things here. We gotta switch up our slide here. No, you want to go through the spending again, and then we have some polling, so everyone kind of see how close this is, which is kind of lines with our polling. Sorry, we're tripping all over our keyboard here, but you want to go through this again. We've got a lot of questions about where this came from, whether or not this is a good amount of spend or not a good amount of spend. Give us a little context for this kind of spend in a House race.
So I'm also just going to drop my Twitter handle. I don't know what it's on Decision Desk. So at Rudnick Noah, there's a new interactive whole Tableau dashboard, so you can go in, you can see who's spending, when, how much daily, and then as it accumulates over the whole cycle. This is a lot of money. It's more, I think it's in the top about 30 if you compare it to the 2018 races. It is an off year, so everyone's looking to, actually get some business in and actually find a race to spend on. So it's not Georgia 6 levels. I'd say it's probably appropriate for a toss-up, especially if you're the Republicans and you do believe that this will spark retirements. I don't know if I believe that PA18 really didn't. But so the big thing is that the $10 million is a lot in terms of I would love $10 million. And so, but in the large scale of things, it's an important race, but not anything that can't be replicated. We saw last cycle a lot of these more toss-up races in the 2018 would go for about $25 million. So $10 million is a lot, but not out of the ordinary nowadays for a toss-up. What are some of the other questions on here?
We're gonna pull up your Tableau, man. Let's give you some attention. Give us a second here where we pull it up.
Yeah. So the big thing here, there's 3 sheets. You can see the overall spending, the breakdown out of all the spending, and then the daily one's the interesting one to me too, because I think you can really see the strategy of spending early and negative, and then you can see the pro McCready drops every week. There's about 300,000 that they were just sort of drop, or every 10 days that they were dropping about another 300,000 in pro McCready, while the Republicans really bombarded the airways, especially in August, which was a little after the primary happened. They went big anti-McCready ads. And that was another thing that Congressional Leadership Fund and the NRCC not as much did during last cycle. The Congressional Leadership Fund has new leadership, and so they haven't reinstituted their field office program, but they've so far stuck to the same.
So on this screen, just walk us through what this is, because this is pretty intense for all of us on our phone.
Yeah, especially if you're not on your phone. So What this shows is, on the side shows the filter, but this shows every time there was a buy on that date and what it was filed on with the FEC, it would register in. So the scale on the side goes up to $1 million. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're filing at a single time. And if you were to hover over one of these bars, you can see the expense amount. You can see whether, so the dark blue is pro McCready, so that's Democrat spending. Light blue is anti Dan Bishop. So anything that's blue is Democratic spending, with the fainter being negative, and anything red is Republican spending. So you can see that big blob right in August, where you're really talking like $2.3 million dropped in a week, and the vast majority of it's anti-McCready. And the only positive is Club for Growth, which is associated with one of the two major ones. And then if you are on the desktop, which is a nice feature, you can go over to the side and there's a full checkbox. So you can, if you just want the Democratic spending and you just want pro-McCready and anti-Bishop, you can check the boxes and then it'll change for you. Or if you want to see who's spending what. So there's a lot of these spending. A bunch of them are small. Some of the bigger ones that were positive that were interesting to see when they dropped are ones like the one to re-elect the president or support the president.
So real quick, it looks like the polls just closed. We should be getting results here in 60 to 120 seconds. You want to pull up the EV stuff real quick, Alex, so we can walk through everyone in that. Drew, interrupt us if we get it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do have NC-03 votes in, and we got our first dump from NC-09 as well.
What do we got?
Let's see. Early votes from everywhere except Mecklenburg and Richmond. Pretty close in the first dump. It's 50.4 for McCready, 49.1 for Bishop. That's not a great early vote total, but Mecklenburg is still out. But that's a tight one for a Democrat in early voting.
Gotcha.
You know, I think McCready's team would want to see something much more substantial. It's not entirely clear just yet how many of them. I mean, we're talking, 23 and a half thousand, 22,895 for Bishop. But again, within a point and a half on early voting, I think that will make Republicans happy.
Pull up the early voting stats so we can run through that real quick.
So we're working on getting those up. So let's see if we can get the votes up as well. Georgia's on the.
They're up. Here we go.
There we go. Cool.
So yeah, what's our analysis on the early vote?
So everything but Mecklenburg and Richmond, huh? So Union, you have Dan Bishop at 55% among the early voters. Bladen County, you've got Dan Bishop at 50% among the early votes. Yeah, so it looks like we have.
Just for everyone watching, talk to them about why Union's so important for a guy like Dan Bishop.
So Union and Bladen are the two counties that Bishop is expected to take. This district is very different than a lot of the races that we've seen more recently, where usually the map is dominated by red counties and then a few urban blue counties carry the day for the Democrat. In this district, most of the counties are actually blue, and only 2 of them are red. Kind of bucking some of the national trends, although it is a district that normally would be heavily Republican, and it's expected to be close tonight. So still trending a little bit blue.
Hey Drew, do you got anything to add on what you think on this early vote stuff?
Just in talking to Brendan Finnegan, our election director, what he's looking for and the call team is looking for, you want to see a mix of early votes, absentee votes, and obviously day of to confirm trends. But the expectation is the early and absentee votes would, come in pretty substantially for the Democrats, where the day of tends to favor Republicans. That's been the trend as early and absentee voting has become more and more popular. So it's hard to say exactly what this is. This could just be absentees, I think, or maybe it's just early votes. It's hard to say exactly. One of the problems that you'll see too is we have 0% reporting. That's how you know it's not day of voting. That's just one of the quirks of this. Could be a reasonable amount of votes coming in, and you still see 0 precincts reporting. just because that's how they report early and absentee. They don't assign them to the to an individual precinct until later in the process.
Just while we're doing this, Drew, and we're getting a lot of this in the chat, like everyone's excited because McCready's up. Historically speaking, the Dem has done pretty good in early vote in North Carolina. We've still got a lot of votes to tally. Interestingly enough, in the last 5 minutes or so on Predicted, the Dems' chances have basically, gone up 5 and 10 cents as everyone's trying to figure out what it is. But our decision desk folks, we're gonna be in it for a while before we start reading too much into this, right?
Oh yeah, you have to be very careful about this. When the call team looks at this, they want to see, obviously, from the larger counties, they want to see the trends. They want to see based on expectations that we had. Also, when you have an election that was just 10 months ago or 11 months ago at this point, you have some sense of that. Specials are always a little bit of an odd duck in and of themselves, but this is still too early to call, certainly, or to even really read too much into, but it may not be exactly what Democrats were hoping for, I would think.
So let's switch over to the early vote. That's a good extension, so everyone can see where these, first basically 50 or so thousand early votes came in. Pull that up real quick. Sorry, we got so many graphics here. We're shuffling them through.
And just one thing I want to just go where we're doing that. Let me just jump back in here and remind people. Mecklenburg is a big county. It's the Charlotte suburbs and the exurbs. That's the area that Bishop represents, but it's also an area where the Democrats are expected to really, make some hay. So until we really even see the early absentee voting from Mecklenburg, you can't draw too many conclusions about it.
Got it. So walk us through what we're looking here, Alex.
Yeah, so here we have a breakdown by county. This is the percentage of people who have requested an absentee ballot or showed up early vote who are registered Democrats. And so, for example, we see that in Anson and Robeson County that the Democrats have taken up a huge part of the vote share of that ABEV. However, in Union County, for example, it's a much smaller vote share. And so Democrats were outperforming as a percentage of the party affiliation of ballots requested Republicans in most of the counties. However, the two where Republicans were beating Democrats were the two largest counties.
So real quick, Alex, how many people early voted?
We're at about 80,000.
80,000. How does that compare to previous elections?
Let me get that number.
So definitely lower than 2018.
And it's lower because it's a special election.
Yeah, exactly. The other dynamic with the early vote is that so typically in midterm elections, you see a drop off in terms of the percentage of the electorate that votes early. We didn't actually see that in 2018. 2018 was a very high turnout year, and people were electrified to go to the polls. And so what you saw was that most of the vote in this district in 2018 was early. In this case, in this election, we're not expecting most of it to be early, and that is more in line with what happens in a midterm year or in a special election like this. Namely, people wait until the last second to vote. They don't have the election at the top of their heads like they do in a presidential year. And so what ends up happening is people who would normally vote early just end up voting on election.
So just real quick, what do you got there?
Yeah, so I have some numbers here. And so just for context, so people remember, this current configuration of the North Carolina 9th District was redrawn in 2016. So we don't have a lot of data for the district as it was drawn. And some people listening into us right now might be thinking, why are they spending so much time talking about ABEV vote, where usually that's sort of a secondary concern? Well, in this district, we have two general elections to turn to. And in 2016, ABEV actually made up 64% of all the votes cast. And in the 2018 midterm general election, ABEV made up 55.5%. Now, as Alex had mentioned earlier tonight, a lot of those are early votes. So it's people who just show up like they would on election day. They go to the polls. And so it's not really a lot of mail votes, despite that everyone is going to talk about the mail aspect to this campaign, given the alleged fraud of 2018. And so, but we will say that that these are numbers that we're going to be watching very closely, just because historically it's such a large proportion of the overall vote share.
Go ahead, Neil.
One of the most interesting things to me too is that this early vote comes in is that we had some polling from this district come out, and typically the Libertarian and Green Party were taking about 3 or 4% from this early vote, and like the in-person voting in PA 18 had a bit higher, but combined less than 0.5%. It's not going to reach that. So the odds of a plurality win are way lower, and this third-party vote isn't really going to materialize. There's nothing else on the ballot. So there were some like Montana special, Alabama special, even PA 18 that were very close plurality wins, but it looks like the polling really overestimated how many people were going to just vote for a random minor party instead of one of the major parties looking at the results coming in.
Hey, can we switch over to the results here for a second, just so we can show everyone where we're at, because it looks like everyone's kind of going back and forth on what's accurate. Drew, it looks like we're ahead, and we're still waiting on Mecklenburg to drop their EVs.
Yeah, and so far none of that has come in. None of their early voting from Mecklenburg is in there.
Got it. And that's a big one, because that's the...
And also that's going to be something where the Democrats are really going to look to make some hay there.
Yeah, I was about to say, once Mecklenburg drops, the margin for McCready is going to go up a little bit. So we have something interesting to showcase. So we have some vote goal percentages by county, and so I'll explain what's going on here. Basically, we have a vote goal in mind for McCready and for Bishop at the county level. This document will help us track which candidate is ahead and which candidate is behind at the county level as the night goes on. Now, the early vote is and was expected to be more favorable to McCready than Bishop. And as you can see on this screen right now, we have it reflects that. Anson County is McCready's best county at the moment in terms of relative performance to expectations. So he's actually outperforming what he needs by 9% at the moment. However, all of these numbers are only early votes, right? So as the election day votes come in, we're expecting these advantages to drop and go more in favor of Bishop. Now, what does this mean in terms of who's winning? Well, I can tell that Richmond County, for instance, which McCready is only barely beating out expectations in at the moment, that probably is going to be a county in which Bishop outperforms relative to expectations by the end of the night. Some of these other counties are tougher, right? So Robeson, Scotland, Union, Cumberland, all of those are at about 4% overperformance for McCready. We're expecting that to drop. Will it flip to Bishop? Possibly. We're not sure. It'll be interesting to see once Mecklenburg comes in and we update this, what Mecklenburg's percentage looks like in terms of performance relative to the expectation at the beginning of the night.
So walk us through. We're waiting on Mecklenburg, which you think is big. If you're looking at this now, Alex, what are you thinking? You think this is good for the Dev? You think this is good for the Republican? You think we should be caring about it and waiting for more votes?
So it reflects that it's going to be a close race, I think. If you made me choose one side or the other, I would say that Bishop's camp would be happier with this than McCready's camp. Election day, we knew that early votes were going to favor McCready. The tough part in a simple election like this is knowing ahead of time what election day voters are going to look like.
Hey, and just to throw a number on our conversation of why we're waiting, why we care so much about Mecklenburg, according to the ABEV report from this morning, nearly 39%, that's 39% of the ABEV votes were accepted in Mecklenburg County. So that's a huge number that we're waiting for. It's not just one county. So we're waiting for 40% of the ABEV vote in Mecklenburg County.
I just want to drop in, by the way, we're getting more votes in the North Carolina 3. Looks like our call team's getting close to calling that. The Republican Greg Murphy is up by 16% at this point.
Yeah.
Almost 20% of the vote in, which is including day of votes. So, that race is going as expected.
Got it. Hey, Noah, what do you see? You see anything interesting in some of these county results or anything like that?
It's still super early. You're definitely seeing a back and forth. I think the big thing was looking at the Union early vote. McCready does look a bit better, but turnout there is only about half of what it was in 2018, and that's the big thing with these special elections, is that you never really know who's gonna actually show up for them, and the fact that it is so small doesn't help. Mac is the big one. Union looks a little weaker, but some of the outside rural ones look better. I think you could see. I remember they were talking about how Trump's rally had an impact where they could help register some people around there, and that was a big thing in Ohio 12, where they thought that it would hurt them in some more of the suburbs, but that Trump's rally actually helped boost turnout in some of the surrounding areas, and you could see some of the similar dynamic, but without as much of the suburban backlash as there was in around Delaware County in central Ohio.
Oh, looks like we got a Mecklenburg dump, so this
Yeah.
sheet will be updated in a second.
Yep, and it looks like McCready overall is up in the early votes by 9 points, which probably means he did pretty well in Mecklenburg.
So does that fit in line with our vote goals? What do we think if he's up by 9?
I think so now with Mecklenburg in, it's definitely going to be a razor thin margin. I think. Again, depending on election day, there's a lot of.
I mean, we thought he had to be at 10, 11 at Mecklenburg to be pretty safe. I mean, those were where we were in a high turnout scenario, but this looks like it's going to be an
So based off of our non-exit poll, exit poll, I would say that
there was air quotes there for all of you just listening and not watching over here.
I believe, so basically if McCready was up 10 with the early votes, I think he'd be in good shape.
That's what we were getting at.
Yeah.
At 10 to 11, we thought this could be a clean win for McCready. At 8 to 9, it's at 9, we'll take a look and we'll drop it in the vocal so everyone can see it. 8 to 9, everyone should get some more caffeine, or at least some more bourbon. I think Noah's in his 9th beer. I can't wait to see these maps in an hour. But yeah.
And he's over 60 in Mecklenburg. He was only 57 for 2018. So the big thing here, too, is that the Libertarian candidate is, of course, not getting that extra 2%. But the fact that that vote share is going to McCready is good for him to boost that margin, especially if he's flagging a bit more in the smaller rural ones.
Got it. Can we dump the Mecklenburg stuff in now so we can take a look?
Yeah, we can.
And just while you're doing that, we did make the call while we were discussing that in North Carolina 3. As expected, the Republicans hold on to the late Walter Jones' seat.
Which is as expected.
Yeah, that was not even particularly close, as expected.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what is it? Let me see, just get the right screen up. 16 points, 20% of the vote in. So, yeah, no surprises there.
If we're looking for just an interesting side story, so the Constitution Party candidate's in 3rd place there. The only reason that they're able to make the ballot is that North Carolina imposed these super high expectations for third parties to get on the ballot. The Libertarian Party did, and then the North Carolina GOP immediately lowered it in order to also get the Green Party to try to take away from the left, and their standards lowered it so much that the Constitution Party was able to sneak in. So now North Carolina has 5 major parties that can get on the ballot fairly easily, and that sort of dynamic went from no third parties to a bunch of third parties could come into play during higher turnout when more people are protest voting. So it's just an interesting thing here that the brand new parties managed to eke by, even if it's only like 60 more votes.
So, Alex, walk us through this on the advantage. Now we got a full look at the early vote and this vocal sheet. Just for everyone watching, this is what the pros, the operatives use when they're trying to analyze what's going on. Some of you guys are probably watching this, have your own sheets. But this will kind of help us get a view on what's going on here. Alex, walk us through what everyone's looking at and what the advantage means.
Yeah. So these are the percentage benchmarks, if you will, for the two candidates in each county. So what we're saying here is if McCready ends the night at 58.6% of the vote in Anson County, then that means that he's probably in pretty good shape. On the other hand, if Bishop ends up at 41.4, he's probably in pretty good shape. So what we've been doing is we've been updating these votes as they come in for the actual current percent for Dem and current percent for GOP in each of the counties. So you can see that it looks like we've got some election day votes coming in now. And so these numbers are changing as they're being updated. But in seven out of the 8 counties at the moment, McCready has an advantage. Now, relative to expectations, okay? So that's this column right here. Now, as I mentioned, the early vote was supposed to favor McCready relative to Election Day. So it's no surprise that all of these columns were blue before Election Day votes started coming in. And the question is, how many of these are going to flip to red? Red means that Bishop is outperforming relative to expectations. So it'll be interesting to see as the night goes on the rate at which these numbers dip, and if we start seeing some counties flip over to Bishop. Again, this is a very nuanced way of looking at this. We don't really care who's winning the county because we already know what the tilt is of each of these counties. What we care about is how are they performing relative to expectations.
And just to give you an idea of where we're seeing day of already, a little bit in Anson, 2 of 11 precincts. Scotland County is all in 10 of 10. And Union's 12% of the precincts are in 6 of 52. So those are the only 3 places we're actually seeing day of at this point.
Got it. So talk to us a little bit since we got the results up. Obviously, we've got this. Union County is something, we need a lot of votes out of there if you're Dan Bishop. Mecklenburg, which is the suburbs outside of Charlotte. Alex, on our not exit poll, talk to us a little bit about the suburban exurban divide. This is one of those districts that's got the suburbs, has the exurbs. This is a district that Trump won by 9 points back in 2016, and here we are. Everyone's kind of on their edge here. What do we know about the electorate? Who are these people?
Yeah, so we do see a bit of a split throughout the district, but a lot of the district, even though we do see somewhat of this divide, a lot of the district is within the same population density. It's the sections of the counties that are included here. So we're in the suburbs. So most of this is as defined by. I'm trying to think of who put these numbers together, but it's like medium population density to low population density. So there's not a wide variance in this district. However, there are some east-west divides where even like, for example, if we look at our AV-EV map that we were talking about earlier, we do see that there was a Democratic surge in the eastern part of the district compared to the western part. But we're going to be tracking to see whether or not that's true also with the election day results that we have.
Got it. What's up on the screen right now, Alex?
Those are just the results.
Okay.
Scotland's in at about like a little over 60% of what it was in 2018, which is pretty decent turnout from there. And the big thing will be to see if Mecklenburg is greater than that. Right now, Mecklenburg's on track for it. But as we saw in several of the other southern states or something like Georgia 6, a lot of times when there is more engagement, it could just cannibalize the vote. So we'll see when more come in. But the big thing will be getting Mecklenburg to turn out. Because if the rurals are at 60% of 2018, it's going to be about matching what is still decent for a special election enthusiasm, but definitely something that can be improved upon by the Democrats.
Yeah, again, just to sort of build off that point, part of the reason why we're just focusing on Mecklenburg County is just because there's such a huge, what we're expecting to be a huge population of the vote is within that county. The same thing with Union County. So for example, if we look at the 2018 general election, we had 34% of all the votes cast were from Mecklenburg, 31% were from Union County, and then everything else was 11 points or fewer as a percentage of the total of the congressional district. So we're going to be watching Mecklenburg and Union really closely, as well as the others, but Mecklenburg and Union especially earlier in the evening.
Some people are like dropping some information in here. Wait, go back to the results real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are saying that the AP has Union flipping to be Dem. That can't be right.
With 18 to 52 in, it looks like the AP has 54% McCready.
In Union County?
Yeah.
Hey, Drew, are
18
you
in.
seeing that?
That
The
might
AP
be
has.
That might be a data error.
Is that a data error on the AP side? They've got.
That would be.
What do we have? What do we have Union
We have
County
the, almost the
at?
opposite.
Show it on the screen.
Yeah.
What do we have it at?
Yeah, so we're at 55 Bishop, 44 McCready, which is roughly.
Scroll down to the county so we can see it in the vocals.
And there's way less votes. So the AP must have a dump from Union County that looks beyond unbelievable for McCready if true.
Yeah, I mean
Let's see
everyone's
that poll.
it's everyone's chatting about it. We do not have those equivalent Union numbers that the AP has. When we get an update, we'll let you know. But I mean, if that's true, then it's over for Bishop. But we don't think that's true. All right. So while we're sorting that out, Drew, interrupt us if you get anything on this Union thing that everyone's freaking out about.
Yeah, checking into that.
Yeah, we'll look into that, but we'll let the Associated Press figure that one out.
Yeah, it's Dave Wasserman has commented on it and said that it is a reporting error on the New York Times site,
Got
and
it.
it will be fixed shortly.
That's too bad. Let's go to the polling so we can kind of review that. Walk us through the polling, kind of leading up to this. Feel free to pipe in.
I mean, basically, it's been expected to be a very close race from the beginning. These are the polls that have been released since July. There hasn't been a ton of public polling. A lot of the private polling has also reflected this. I think on the totality, most of the public and private polling has a slight edge for McCready, but really it's expected to be a very, very close race.
Cool. Anything interesting on
Does
the poll?
anyone,
Go ahead.
Yeah, does anyone know anything about this coefficient strategies? Because I was looking them up and they're like, Twitter account's brand new. I thought it was like one of those like predicted scam ones. But apparently it's been in the news before as like push polling. So I don't know, it kind of just got like tweeted out by political polls.
I don't know.
And,
Let's open up on the site. We can go coefficient. He's got a website. Let's go look him up and see what he's all about. Anything else?
So I don't want to accuse of like a legit.
Yeah, I don't know, but
it's
let's see what it is. I hadn't looked at it. You brought it up. Just so you guys know, Noah, when he's not doing maps and drinking beer at night, he is a.
That's all I'm doing.
He
But I'm
he
also
works at a
doing
polling
other
firm, so he's got some opinions on these things.
Just so you know, by the way, we got some more votes in from Union County.
Oh,
to
go back to you
19%.
Wait,
Yeah.
open up the vocals just to make sure. Maybe the New York Times and AP had it right.
Oops.
That Dan Bishop was losing Union County.
We can go to bed early if that is, but I don't think it is.
Yeah. What do we got out of Union? Okay, so what do we have Union at?
Bishop 56 now, so just going up, not going down.
Yeah, AP still has. how many
Anson's
votes
about
in?
halfway in. Scotland's fully in. And then most of the counties are still at nothing. Election day reporting.
Anson with some in though.
All right, so we got Union. That Union thing is definitely still Dan Bishop ahead.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anson's still coming in though. It looks like it's like half in, and this one McCready only got 56% before. So if half the precincts are in, and like the early vote really hasn't changed that much since it was there, that's a pretty good result for him in that smaller county. So that was he won that one 57.6 to 41 in 2018, and then so far he's up 63 to 36 or 64 to 36. My bad. So and then the early vote I don't believe has changed much since that came out.
Got it. So we don't see, we're pretty much seeing wherever it is. Hey, Alex, can you switch over to the vocals so we can kind of take a look at where that is? Or you want to pull up the coefficient polling thing we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Just a quick note, it looks like on the New York Times site, they have Union back to being Bishop up, which is the numbers we have.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're not going to bed that early.
Got
Yep.
it. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, this was the coefficient poll.
Let's go to the methodology. Let's break it down. Well, first of all, why are we showing this one? Because they had this one, McCready up, right?
Well, so they released two different ones. They released a ballot test with where they asked for all 4 candidates that are in the race, and they asked one for where they only asked Bishop versus McCready head to head. So in the proper ballot test, I guess you would say, where all 4 candidates are listed, it's a tie, McCready and Bishop. The head-to-head is where McCready gets a lead.
So let's take a look at the methodology real quick, and let's switch back to the vocals, because all the people, the angry people on Twitch are complaining they don't have spreadsheets.
Yeah. So what they released was the dates that they fielded, which was it was a 2-day read. It was multi-mode. They used mobile text response, and then they used IVR. They got 1,175 respondents. They call them likely general election voters, so they don't really specify if that's sort of modeling LV or how they determined likely general election voters. They do include design effects in their margin of error, which is impressive. And then they say that their results are weighted by age, gender, party, and education. So, it is a less well-known firm. On first glance, it seems like it passes the sniff test. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, so I saw what Noah was talking about on Twitter. Was this yesterday or 2 days ago? Where I think there were just some questions about some previous polls where I don't think anybody was necessarily complaining about this poll, and because I agree with you, Alex, that it definitely it seems to pass the sniff test. But I think based on some previous behaviors from the firm and just a lack of transparency, that there were just some questions. We're not indicting the firm. We're just trying to learn more about it. And apart from the report that we just had on our screen, that's really all we can go off of.
Yeah, and if you're wondering if we spilled a beer, someone did spill a beer. We are drinking and doing results at the same time. All right, so based on what we have here, Alex and Drew, Mecklenburg's in. What did we talk us through what this advantage is on the right-hand side for all the people? It looks like we added a couple hundred people watching us. So walk them through the sheet.
So this is performance relative to expectation. So we don't care so much if one candidate is leading the other in a particular county. We already know what the sort of partisan lean is of each county, which ones are expected to vote more for McCready, which ones are expected to vote more for Bishop. What we care more about is how are they doing relative to expectations. So the advantage column sort of lumps that together in an easy to read format. And the caution here is that as precincts come in, election day precincts, because all the early votes are in at this point, pretty sure. The advantage for McCready that you see there in a lot of these counties is going to start to dwindle. Now, so far, there's one county that's 100% in, Scotland County, and that ended up flipping to Bishop having met his vote goal. He's at 43.26%. He needed 43% to be in pretty good shape. Scotland is one of the smaller counties. In fact, it's the 3rd smallest county in terms of votes. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Bishop is in great shape. You want to see, especially in Mecklenburg and in Union, what the relative advantage is. Right now, Union is 19% in, and McCready's advantage there has dipped slightly, but it's still hovering at about 4%. If he can maintain that over the remaining 80% of Union County, that would be a pretty good result for him.
And we just got some more union vote in day of. We're up to 31% there. So
we will
it's
update
sizable drop.
We will
Union's
update this.
still a damn Bishop County, right?
Yeah, so we're at 31% reporting right now, Union County. We have Bishop at 56.5%, McCready at 42.85. So yeah, it's a bit of a Bishop County right now, but
Yeah, but again, in that county, McCready only needs to get about 40% of the vote. He's at 42.85 right now. We're expecting that to sort of drop as the night goes on. We'll see if he hangs on enough to the vote.
This is extrapolating pretty wildly from what we have, but if the turnout looks more even around the board, it's going to look very likely that Bishop is going to have to win the election day vote in Mecklenburg in order to meet his vote
All right.
goals.
So repeat that for us.
Yeah,
No,
so-
'cause I actually happen to agree with you, but just so everyone following at home on their phone, walk us through that logic.
Yeah, so one of the big things is that it looks like turnout's going to be slightly over 60% of what it was in 2018. So I think you'd expect that the early vote in Mecklenburg makes up probably a little under half or close to half of what is in. And so the big thing here is that because McCready won it by so much, and it was on the previous screen, because he won it over 60%, and we don't know if it's cannibalized or not, in order to get it down to that 54% vote goal that Bishop's going to have to hit, he's going to have to either win a majority or win at least a plurality of the Mecklenburg election day vote. And so once those start coming in, we'll get a better picture. But that could be more of an uphill slog. So it doesn't matter as much if Bishop's reaching his vote goal or like under 1% in some of the rural ones if they can't turn out Mecklenburg. And that's going to come down to a lot of the Congressional Leadership Fund and a lot of that late spending on stuff like text banking and phone banking and getting into contact and direct mail, that sort of thing where you can target and get out those people. If Mecklenburg turnout's about even with the rest, then Bishop's going to have to win it. And Scott, you were saying you agreed with me on that.
Yeah. I mean, look, on our back of the napkin votes left, we've got 3 turnout scenarios up on the screen. Mecklenburg, it's a high turnout night, which I don't think anyone thinks this thing is going to be ridiculously high.
No.
There's about 45,000 votes left. If it's as expected, there's about 35,000 votes left. And if we think it's a low turnout night, it's about 23,000 left. We think it's probably going to be closer to 35,000 left. And, look, Bishop's got basically the rest of Mecklenburg County before we start making any conclusions.
Yeah.
And unless we get any surprise election day vote turnout numbers, but based on the early vote, I don't think we're looking at a ridiculously high turnout night.
Yeah, and I mean, so Scotland's done, and they did go above the low vote scenario, which is good. It's low for a reason.
In other words,
it looks like
they beat our low vote scenario by about 450 votes.
Yep, and they're shy of the mid scenario by about 900 votes. So only one county, and it's the 3rd smallest county out there, so not necessarily indicative of what Mecklenburg and Union counties are going to do. But if it is representative of the other counties, then...
Since Scotland is 100% in, walk everyone through what this red 0.78 advantage means.
Yeah, so basically it means...
And how that might be indicative or trend line for everyone else that we're looking at.
So it means that Bishop overperformed expectations by about a little less than 1%. And a better way of putting it, because that advantage column is based off of the Dem vote goal, McCready underperformed by about 3/4 of the point. If you compare current GOP percentage to the GOP vote goal, Bishop overperformed by about 1/4 of a point. So if you cut the difference at about half a point, that is Bishop's advantage in that county. Now, again, Scotland is the third smallest county, and so it's not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in the rest of the county.
And Anson looks good for McCready.
Anson does look good for McCready. That is the smallest county, so that means even less than Scotland. But it is an interesting sign that 63% is in Anson. So most votes are in at this point, both absentee and early. And that advantage is still above water. Now, I will note, Anson early vote, McCready overperformed by about 8%. That has dwindled down to about 4%. So, does that mean that a county like Union, a county like Robeson, a county like Mecklenburg or Cumberland, where he didn't quite get, 6, 7, 8% overperformance in the early vote, is that going to end up flipping? If you have Union flip in terms of, this advantage column, if you have Mecklenburg flip, that is definitely not a good sign for McCready. So we'll see as the votes come in. Mecklenburg, so far, no election day votes as of yet. Union is about 31% in. So we'll keep tracking that.
Did McCready win Scotland in 2018?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one
The
Scotland
same-
with 56%.
Yeah, I don't think any counties are going to flip relative to
Right. 2018, yeah.
2018. The one that could actually is Richmond. That one is pretty close at the moment. And in 2018, we pull this up right here. So 2018 results, you see that that McCready won Richmond.
He equaled the majority.
He eked out by about 300 votes. That one is very close tonight. Go back to the results there. It's very, very close at the moment with about 75% of the election day votes left there.
So Alex, there's a lot going on Twitter right now where people are talking about the precincts in doesn't really matter. It's all about vote share. We might have to adjust this real quick so we can see how many votes do we think are left. Total votes available.
Total
left
votes
out.
left. So we've got 96,000 counted so far. Based off of these scenarios, I think we're going to be something shy of 200,000, but not
So
too shy.
Put it on the screen. Like you're just adding this up in your head.
Yeah.
Do a
So the mid
for everyone here.
Yeah. So the mid scenario.
How do we know you're just not randomly picking up 200,000?
Well, so the mid scenario would put it at 98,000 plus the 96 that have already been counted.
In other words, we think there's 98,000 roughly.
I don't think it'll get there.
We don't think it's exactly 98,000 left.
Right, because.
But it's clearly not 5,000 left, and it's clearly not 200,000 votes left.
Right. So it's gonna end up being somewhere between this low scenario and the mid scenario, right? So
Yeah.
the low.
And we just got some more day of Robeson came in.
All right.
The low scenario means 62,000 votes left. The high scenario means 98,000 votes left.
Got it. Let's switch to the results so Drew can walk us through what we just saw.
Yeah, more day of coming in from Robeson County. Union County is up to 44%. So you can see what that comes out to. I'm just trying to pull up Robeson now. It's McCready 60.1% to Bishop's 39.5%. In the where do we figure that is? It's about 13% of the precincts in from Robeson County.
So keep walking us through what you got. Sorry, we're adjusting the view here so it's easier to see.
Yep, more of unions come in. We're up to 44%. Bishop's still leading there, basically at 58% to 41.5% for McCready. So he's got a reasonable margin there so far, but still, the one we've been waiting on all night is Mecklenburg to see some of that day of. We don't have any of that. We are at about, let me see what it says here, almost a quarter of the precincts in, but again, it's really about vote shares and total turnout, given that we had all that early voting and absentee voting already in there. I just want to check and see if anything's updated. No, it's still the same. Yeah, Union's almost half in, and we'll have to see how that correlates to your vote goals there. What they're doing and how he's getting close to what he needs. Still coming down, right? It was originally for McCready, and now it's down to, it looks like 1.64%.
Alex.
Yep. Yeah, it's down to 1.64% in Union at the moment in terms of that relative advantage that we've been talking about throughout the night.
Now, Scott, as of right now, the latest best offer on Predictive for Dan McCready is 56 cents. Are you buying, selling? What's going on?
I'm
going
gonna
to
hold my position mostly because I got in the low 50s. But what I found most interesting about Predicted is I've seen it as high as about mid 60s for McCready and as low 50s, and this is all since polls closed in a little bit more than an hour, which means no one knows what they're doing when they're looking at this. Everyone's freaking out. I mean, what's your take on it, Noah?
My thing is, if Bishop ends up winning this, and McCready started out with over 60 in the early vote in Mecklenburg, and he started out with a whole bunch of these, I think Richmond just flipped back, but Union looked better. If Union hits over 60 for Bishop, you really have to look at why you're cannibalizing the early vote so much. You saw it in Florida, you saw it in North Carolina in 2016, and it's purely a campaign failure. It means that you're turning out these people to vote, but they were going to vote anyway, and then you're supposed to use those weeks to go in and target these unlikely voters and to really use it. And the fact that if Democrats keep failing that and have been failing that for all 4 years now, and why that early vote's coming in so well, and why they can't build on that, it's really an indictment of the strategy they've been pursuing, and a really good one in terms of, like in Georgia, Kemp was able to turn out these rural votes election day. In Florida, DeSantis and Scott were able to get these election day votes. So it speaks to something that the Republicans are doing well to make sure that their people show up, and something that Democrats are lacking to keep the pressure on and expand it out. So just in terms of party strategy, if this turns out to be a narrow Bishop win, I think the Democrats are really going to want to take a look at what they're doing and what they're failing at in the critical week to 2 weeks before the actual election day vote.
Wait, so explain to us the logic there. So a vote's a vote, right? So what difference does it make if I show up early to vote or if I show up on election day?
Yeah, so if you're someone who has ever signed on to an email list or a text list and then you stupidly respond that you haven't voted yet but are planning to, then I'm sure you know that you will get spammed with votes, especially if you have a vote history. And the big thing is that costs money. They got to get the list. They have to actually go out and reach out to you, and they have a cost per voter. And if they're spending time doing that, they can't reach out. But if you've already voted, they can wipe their hands. They can just mark you down as voted early and voted Democrat, and then they can move on to the next thing. And the big thing is that that's supposed to free up resources. In the last couple of weeks, you have tens of thousands of dollars, or on a presidential scale, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you ideally should have to reach some of. They're going to fall into likely Democrat, but higher propensity. And so that means that higher turnout to vote, and that a lot of that is typically winds up as more minority votes or more younger votes, and especially we saw the exit polls all older. So the problem is that the Democrats should have all these extra resources that they should be using on a voting base that really is low turnout, high Democratic likelihood. And for some reason, they're dropping the ball in the last couple of weeks. While Republicans are able to still get these people that maybe more usually low turnout, but inspired by a Trump rally or inspired by the last nationalization push to really get out there and vote in the special election. And they're doing a good job, especially in these white rural areas, especially in the South. And for some reason, Democrats aren't able to match them. And I don't know what's going on in the internal party structure. But if Bishop is able to win and McCready's able to start out with a strong performance, above expectations in Mecklenburg, ahead of some of these counties early on, like Richmond, if they fall behind and they end up losing it, especially if it's only by a couple hundred votes, those lost and wasted resources are a huge damnation of the party's strategy.
Is it the party strategy, or is it just a function of the party base? I mean, Barack Obama was able to do that, and that's something that they saw in 2018. Is that what they thought was their new baseline for their voters turned out not to be.
Yeah.
They went back to more historical averages, so that the Democratic coalition is more likely to show up in a presidential year, and if they're given reason for enthusiasm, which is something obviously they're debating as they go through their primary this time. It's how important it is having, a motivating candidate versus who everybody thinks is more likely to be able to win. That's the tension, but that's a tension within the voters of the Democratic Party, isn't it? Maybe there's just an immutable thing, and then I don't know. Is there a key to unlock it other than personality? Is it really a structural thing, or is it a candidate thing?
No clue. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to balance on a campaign. I mean, I definitely think you're right in which, like, what was it about Obama, or what is it about some of these other races? So, like, in Texas 32, like, what is it about, like, Colin Allred that allows, like, the African American community there to really see higher turnout? Or in certain districts like that, is it that same sort of common identity politics? Is it where it's really able, the party's able to target them better? Is it about the candidate? It's probably a mix of the two. But until they can find that balance, and while Republicans are able to still turn out their lower turnout voters, it's definitely something they have to look at.
Got it, Alex. Sorry, I reconfigured this. You want to walk us through now? We got some new votes in. How this all works and who's ahead and who's not ahead.
Yep. So I reconfigured the formula to take into account both the Dem vote goal and the GOP vote goal, so it should be slightly more accurate now. Scotland, for instance, now is 0.5% overperformance for Bishop instead of 0.78. So essentially, what you've got here is the vote goal coming into the night versus the current GOP percentage, Dem vote goal, current Dem percentage for each county. And as has been the case for the entire night, the Democrat McCready has a relative advantage. Now, what does that mean? That means that if the counties were to finish counting and these same percentages were the votes, we would expect McCready to win. However, the early vote is going to end up being much more favorable to McCready than the election day vote is, and we've seen that now in all of these counties. And so, as the night has gone on, some of the Richmond and Scotland have flipped over to a slight Bishop advantage. The other counties remain McCready advantage to the moment. Now, nothing here tells me that this isn't going to be a razor close margin. Mecklenburg is not in at all in terms of election day votes, looks like. Cumberland and Bladen also the case. So far, Scotland's the only county that's 100% in. That one has a very, very slight Bishop advantage. Nothing else is close to finishing at this point. So, when I say precincts in, I'm talking about election day precincts. So in all of these counties, even Mecklenburg, Cumberland, Bladen, a very sizable portion of percent of the votes are in. In a county like Anson, where 63% of election day precincts are in, that probably means that upwards of 80% of all votes cast are already in. So we just use precincts in as sort of the standard measurement, but that doesn't mean that only 12% of Robeson is in. That means that 12% of election day Robeson is in.
All right, so it looks like desk fan Kyle Kondik just threw a whole bunch of people here, and they're all screaming at us. Walk everyone through what this is, why this is important, why we're looking at an Excel sheet here, and what it means for tonight's results.
Sure. So, in a race like this, there's an understood partisan lean to all of these counties. Okay. So when we look at
Use the telestrator. Walk them through how to read it.
Yeah, we've got our first precinct in from Mecklenburg, by the way.
Nice.
Just one, but it's starting.
It's just one. It's one.
Yeah, it's just one of the 50.
All right.
So use the telestrator.
Okay.
Walk everyone through how to read this.
Okay. So we've got GOP vote goals right here. Let's change that color up a little bit. Maybe a yellow would be good. Cool. So we've got GOP vote goals right here. Whoop. Wow, that was terrible. These are the percents that we expect. If Bishop achieves, he's in pretty good shape. It's presented in terms of the two-party vote, but the way that we're looking at this, it's essentially a conservative estimate. We don't want to say that Bishop, got a certain percent of the vote and then ends up losing because it's very close. So in other words, does he need, let's say 45%, 45.1% in Mecklenburg? Not necessarily. He could still win even if he's at 44.9%. But these are just sort of benchmarks where if he achieves these, he's in good shape. Now, same thing goes here for Democrat vote goals. Whoop. And so these are relative to expectations for each of these counties. What does McCready need to be in pretty good shape at the end of the night? Okay. Now, this advantage column right here calculates it out easily for people. How are the two candidates doing relative to expectations? Right now, the only one that I would say means something is this one in Scotland because 100% of the vote is in there.
Anson just got updated to about 82% of the vote, and McCready's still at 62.6% there.
Okay.
Which is interesting because, like, if I were to compare it to the surrounding Union and Richmond counties, Richmond still has a bunch to come in, and Union still has a bunch to come in, but he's probably underperforming there. And if the election day keeps coming and going down, so the fact that Anson is a bright spot, even though it is the smallest county possible, is just an interesting little stat there.
So for everyone watching, the reason why we have 0 precincts reporting in Bladen, Cumberland, and Mecklenburg, despite the fact we have vote showing, is because it's early vote that's displayed, and so we're still waiting for election day vote. Once we get election day vote in, we'll start seeing precincts getting filled in. For everyone out there, if you're looking at this, Mecklenburg County had 96,150 votes in 2018. So that's the biggest county out. We've only seen 31,000 of those votes in. So we're expecting the bulk of the votes to come in from Mecklenburg, the second most votes to come in from Union. And in Mecklenburg, basically McCready's got to get 54%. He's currently at 60. We expect McCready to give some votes back to Bishop here over the night, but that'll be a big one to look at.
Yeah, Scott, just to put some numbers on that, we're talking over 60% of the vote comes from Mecklenburg and Union.
Yep.
In the 2018 election, 34% of the vote came from Mecklenburg, and we had 31% come from Union. And those numbers are pretty close to where they were in 2016 as well. So we're still watching those two places very, very closely.
Gotcha. Drew, where are we expecting to get some stuff next, since you're kind of close to all this?
Probably some more from Union, Robeson, and of course the big one is Mecklenburg. That's, if it's starting to come in, it's one precinct, but hopefully that breaks the dam and we can start to see some day of voting from there.
Yeah,
those are the three that we're expecting the next really big reports from.
Got it. So while we're waiting for some of this again, you want to switch over to the spending? Hey, Noah, who's on with us, does all the maps and the spending, has put together some cool stuff. Let's switch to a spending chart, and we'll go into the TV stuff.
So one of the interesting things here, too, so there was another election going on in North Carolina 3rd, and Greg Murphy, the Republican, won there in that pretty R district. And he was a Freedom Caucus member, so that's another addition to the, rabble-rousing rebel group there. And a big thing, too, is in this race, especially if it winds up close, Club for Growth, which does a lot of the bankrolling for House Freedom Caucus, spent $1 million. The House Freedom people spent about another 100,000 on there. So there were 7 figures gone into this race in order to get this Freedom Caucus guy in. There was more money to going into the primary. So if they can spend there, that's a big thing. North Carolina 9, as you can see on the chart up here, is really broken up by media markets. A lot of the other North Carolina ones are more compact. But the big Mecklenburg and Union counties fall in the Charlotte market, and that takes up the most of it. But if you want to play, you really have to buy in a bunch. And so both candidates spent the vast majority of their money in the Charlotte market. So you can see McCready spent about a little over $5 million total in Charlotte, while the Bishop team spent about the same, but probably more. I think this adds up to about 5.4 million. So they really focused on the more populous centers. They threw some more money in. McCready was really focused on Myrtle Beach. He spent $1.8 million there, and that's Scotland and Robeson. So the fact that he fell behind in Scotland, despite spending about $1 million more, is probably disheartening for him. He was really trying to get these smaller ones. The big thing will be decided in the Charlotte market that makes up so much. Neither side really went for Wilmington. In the Raleigh-Durham area, so Cumberland, we're still waiting on a lot of those. McCready definitely put in more money. So we'll see if that pays off. If he could just hold those margins, if we see one where a lot of the rurals flip, but where some of these smaller ones stay at decent enough margins that Mecklenburg can make up for it, these spends will have been a good investment on his part. But this is really dominated by one market, and then you sort of travel around and do events in the other part.
Cool. Looks like we've got a few more votes in. Mecklenburg is just one precinct in so far. A few of these counties are starting to get to about 2/3 of the election day precincts in. Interestingly, Richmond, we've got Bishop overperforming relative to expectations by about 3% now. So that is an interesting observation. Richmond is, it looks like, the fifth largest county in the district. It's still dwarfed by Mecklenburg and Union. Union is about 2/3 of the vote in. Union is one of Bishop's best counties. So right now the advantage in Union for McCready is pretty much null and void. It's at 0.3%.
And let's switch it back to the results here.
Yeah.
No one knows what you're talking about.
We're working on getting it on the screen there. Cool.
Go back to the Excel doc.
Yeah, one of the reasons why the Excel doc and the vote goals are so helpful is part of this conversation that we were talking about earlier about what number of votes we need to look at in order to try and understand what's left out there. So right now, Mecklenburg County, we have 1 of 50 precincts in. However, there are over 30,000 votes that are in. So don't be totally deceived by just the 2% number. There's already a lot of vote in. However, there's still a lot of election day vote that we're still waiting to hear from in Mecklenburg County that we're waiting for.
And it looks like we just got about 5 more from Robeson just came in. So that's just been updated. You know, one thing just looking at this overall that we should kind of keep in mind, this is a battle about messaging. It's not going to change the balance of power in the House. This is about both parties wanting to have a message going into 2020 and be able to talk about momentum. But in the practical sense, it's actually not that big of a deal, but it's more of a temperature taking, and everybody's going to want to do their messaging off that. And what will probably happen is it'll be a close race, and it'll be enough for everybody. The Democratic Party will say, you see, look, we've cut into this. This is a big Trump count area. And the Republicans will say, you know what? We won. We brought the president in. We brought the vice president in. All the big guns were there, and we won, and that's all that counts. So this is really about their messaging going forward into 2020.
Yeah. Anson is almost all in. It looks like there's only 1 precinct left. And McCready's relative advantage there has once again dropped and now is less than 1%. So, I mean, all signs point to a pretty close race here. I keep looking at Mecklenburg as, McCready, if he could pull off a good performance there, that might be the thing that pulls him over the top. Otherwise, there's nothing in here that tells me that this isn't going to look very, very similar to 2018.
And more of Robeson's coming in, Robeson, and it looks worse for McCready than the benchmarks he has to hit now, where he started pretty high in the early vote. So he's only at 54.7 in our latest thing.
So that would flip. Now, I will say, in some of these counties where you only have a few precincts, Robeson has 39 precincts. The precincts aren't necessarily representative of the county as a whole, right? So you can see these numbers go up and down as the precincts come up. The internal rule that I have with looking at these is I don't start to pay too much attention to it until at least half of the precincts are in. Just general rule of thumb that I follow. So at the moment, Scotland's 100% in, Anson's almost all in. Both of those demonstrate a very, very close race. As we look ahead to 2020, that this race looks like it's going to be a repeat of 2018, and either side could win it at this point. What does that say for control of the House in 2020, if anything? Do you have any thoughts, Alex?
I mean, I think Drew brought up a good point that this is just like a messaging fight.
Yeah.
Noah, how much money was spent again in the race?
About 10 million in outside, and then another 4 million in candidate spending.
So $14 million for a messaging fight.
Yeah.
We briefly turned on CNN earlier in the evening, and they had a graphic on the bottom of the screen showing the balance of power going into the North Carolina special election race, and it was sort of laughable because this is not contributing at all to that. Which I think, yeah, Drew, I think you bring up a good point that it's mostly a messaging fight, and let us remember that Georgia 6 right now is represented by a Democrat.
And also there was a lot of talk before Pennsylvania 18, which is very similar to this.
Yeah.
That, this is going to cause a mass wave of exodus, and then only like 2 additional reps. Every representative has their own polling, and stuff like Will Hurd resigning probably sends a bigger call than whether or not North Carolina 9 goes 1% either direction and is a close win or a close loss. So I think representatives are weighing this separately. I don't know how much they take on this House. I think that there could be something, maybe donor enthusiasm could flow one way or the other, but I'm very skeptical that a result between a 1-point McCready win and a 1-point Bishop win would really have huge impacts on the 2020 House race.
So people are asking, how much did Trump win North Carolina by in 16?
North Carolina 9?
No, the state.
The state.
I want to say
North
like
Carolina
3 or
9 and
4.
16. I could be wrong. Someone would yell at me, but I want to say it was 9 points.
It was a 3.
12. Okay.
12.
So Trump did 12 points statewide, and I believe 9 points
3.
in North Carolina 9
Wait.
So
no.
Time
North Carolina
out.
by
No, I think you had that backwards.
3.7%.
One North Carolina by 3, one North Carolina 9 by 12.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. So based on that, obviously it's close. To Alex's point, we want to wait till stuff's in. Precincts is what old people look at. What do we look at here? If you want to walk everyone through some of the turnout here, Alex.
Yeah, so this takes in both early and election day votes as they come in. All of the early votes are in at this point.
Well, here's the big thing right here. So just so everyone can read this, here's Anson County.
Yeah.
Bishop's got to get 41.4 by our calculations to win it. He's currently at 40.28. In other words, McCready's got a 0.86% advantage here. In Mecklenburg County, we think that Bishop needs about 45%. He's currently at 39, which gives...
We just got some more Mecklenburg in, too, up to about 14%.
It'll be updating live here while I'm doing this. But right now, McCready's got 5-point lead there. Here's where it's interesting. At one point, we'll go into this real in depth. But basically, if we look at by county, how many votes we think are left. Let's not even talk about precincts. Let's talk about how many votes are left. In Anson, we have already blown past our low vote goal. There's 450. If there's at least 415 votes more coming out of Anson, we'll be right at our mid vote goal or mid turnout projection.
And our mid vote projection is roughly 200K.
Yeah.
So as of now, it looks like we'll be a little bit shy of 200K.
Yeah. So it just gives you an idea of kind of where this stuff is at and why we're looking at it. Precincts are interesting, but based on what's left. Bishop, when he started the night, this was all blue. It was all advantage McCready, which we expected, especially with early vote. And, in Scotland, Robeson, and Richmond, basically he's starting to hit or he's starting to get close to where he needs to be. Richmond, he needs to be at 52%. He's currently at 48.
No, other way around.
I'm sorry, 52. He's 4 points above, 44, 42. He's beginning to outperform where he needs to outperform in these counties. But a big chunk of the votes are out of Mecklenburg and Union. If Bishop underperforms in Mecklenburg and Union, it's going to negate the advantage he's built in Richmond, Robeson, and Scotland. All right, so let's switch over to the votes, the actual live vote thing, if we can, Alex, and walk people through what everyone's looking at.
Yeah, we've got it right on the right there.
No, scroll through the counties.
Scroll through the
Yeah.
counties. All right. Yeah, so those are all the counties so far.
So on
Scotland-
the right is live from our website. You can take a look at it. On left is our worksheet. We're working out through some of these vote goal scenarios and who's going to win and who's not going to win. This is a dumbed down version of what Brandon and the decision desk team are looking at as they try and figure out, whether they're going to call the race and how long it's going to be. Drew, I get the feeling we think this is still going to be a little ways away before this thing's called.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to see most, or if not all, of Mecklenburg certainly, and that's obviously coming in dribs and drabs here. Like as you've been saying, there's not a lot of secrets, right? Everybody can see what our numbers are, what we're doing. It's all out there for everybody to check on, and that's where the votes are: Mecklenburg and Union, and the day of.
Now,
Yeah.
And if Bishop can keep that close.
now, looking at it on your end, if Union hits 60, is that a big deal, or are you still going to hold out for Mecklenburg a lot longer?
Oh, certainly
They're for
Mecklenburg.
60% for Bishop.
I'm sorry. What's your question? Like,
So, like, how much are you weighing? So, like, if Bishop hits 60 in Union, which it looks like it could happen, how much do you take that as a portent? If Mecklenburg still is coming in drips and drips, do you watching this think that's like a really good sign that tilts in a big, like that would be a big indicator that Bishop
Could he win Bishop? Could he win Union big enough that Mecklenburg really doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Is kind of what you're getting at.
we
Yeah.
think there's about 12,000 votes left in Union. So, man, he'd have to win. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like all of them.
In our mid vocal, there's 12,000 votes left in Union and 31,000 left in Mecklenburg. So he'd probably have to take 90% of those Union votes before we would not wait for Mecklenburg.
And you'd still want to see some Mecklenburg, because if you're seeing crazy swings like that, you can see a crazy swing in
Crazy
Mecklenburg.
swing in Union, which even if there were, I think we want to quadruple check those numbers.
Yeah. We don't know what precincts are in. I know some of the more outlier ones do it early, but back in the napkin math makes it look like Mecklenburg is like 60% Bishop election day, or around there. And that's only a few precincts in, so that will change. But of the like 7 that have come in so far, to get McCready down below that. So we'll keep looking at that, but that's not a great sign for McCready.
Yeah. Sounds good. Let's go back. What do we got here? Looks like people are complaining that we're like moving this around too much. I guess if you want to throw us some money, maybe we'll listen to you. But this is all free at the moment.
Just Venmo me directly.
Yeah,
I'll make
Venmo-
sure that it gets to
Yeah.
decision desk.
Paige Rasmussen, who's trolling us on multiple different chat rooms, you can just call down, and if you wanna, just call your cable company and go pay for the analysis. That's right, folks. We're calling people out in chat rooms. It's like a new level of trolling. Where are we expecting election day votes next? I mean, Mecklenburg, 14% of the election day precincts in.
Mecklenburg is, substantially behind most other counties.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, right now, let's see, did
Oh, you got a fan. Someone said they Venmo the guy with the low voice, Alex.
am I the guy with the low voice?
I'm gonna get
Yeah, let's call it that.
Whoever-
Just
whoever-
send the Venmo, yeah.
Whoever said that, if I'm the guy with the low voice, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like Dan Bishop just took the lead on our page for the first time on the DDHQ results page. Again, Mecklenburg is is lagging behind all the other counties, and Mecklenburg is Bishop's best county. I believe that's right. So actually, no, not best county, but close behind. So it's going to be close all night. I don't know. Richmond is almost done. That's a 4% Bishop advantage relative to expectations there. That's a pretty good number for Bishop. And Anson is almost all in as well. That's a very, very slight advantage for McCready there. So, it looks like some counties are probably going to be slight advantage Bishop. Some are going to be slight advantage McCready. And I don't know. You think it's going to come down to crucial Waukesha County? No.
Yeah, in that I-4 corridor.
Yeah.
Apparently, Mecklenburg is North Carolina for Waukesha.
Yeah, how do
Yeah.
we only get one of those jokes in?
I mean, the important lesson is that the only poll that matters is
Union-
Election day. Yeah.
Union, which is going to be Bishop's best county, is 80% in at this point, 81% in. That's one of the two big counties. So it's interesting that one is so far ahead of Mecklenburg, which is the other big county. Bishop McCready is holding his own in Union in terms of where he's expected to be versus where he is at the moment. So we'll see how Union finishes with the last 20% of election day precincts. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment.
So we've gotten some questions about how we came up with these projections. Basically, you guys can all do this at home. We look at historical turnout in previous elections, so the previous 2018, 2016 specials, and then we just do some basic averaging. There's some more complicated ways in which you can do this, and again, we're not saying that there's exactly 31,888 votes left in Mecklenburg. We're basically saying that's a rough target if it's a mid-turnout election. If it's a low turnout election, there's only be 19,000. If it's a high, there's going to be about 41,000. That just gives everyone a directional goal, and that's what feeds into this based on these vocal percentages.
Yeah.
Nothing too fancy. Next time we're out, we'll break out it even more, but everyone can have their own.
Yeah. And the fact that these numbers are negative here on the low votes means that we are very likely going to be above 160,000 votes, which was the low scenario. Which would have been about 50-50 AB-EV versus election day. It looks like we're going to probably be closer to 200,000. Don't think there's any evidence that we might be above 200,000, although Mecklenburg and Union, Mecklenburg especially, if there's a surge in voting there, could push us close or above 200,000. But at this point, it looks like we're probably going to be just shy of 200,000 votes, somewhere in 190 or so range. We have established that I am not the low voice. I just checked back on the YouTube
Who's gonna get
comments.
the Venmo? Is that you,
So
Podpole?
who's the low voice? Are you the low voice?
I left the room and I don't know what is happening right now.
I mean, we got nothing to talk about, so we're trolling all the people who are trolling us on the chat, which is kind of fun.
Venmo at Noah.
Yeah. Interesting enough, Predict It has kind of glommed on to our undertones here, and they have Dan McCready trading at what, like 20, 25 cents. Do you have any opinions on that, Alexander Podkol?
On Predict It?
Yeah, on the fact that it basically McCready, them winning this North Carolina 9, all day today had been kind of trading between 50 and 60 cents, and now it's dropped to 26 cents based on what's in already. Do you have any opinions on that?
I think people are just reading the trend line. Partly, we've been talking about it all night, how the AB-EV, so that advantage blue-red GOP column that we have on the vote goal sheet started off completely blue. And so it's been looking like Bishop has been overperforming, but it's really just been settling out. If I had any money, I would put it on. I might buy a few McCready shares right now.
Really?
I just don't, so I won't.
All right, well, explain that. Why would you buy some McCready shares down?
It's so low, and it's only 27. This is, I think, a good time to buy with Mecklenburg County. I think the numbers will jump up a little bit.
We got a guy here.
Can I throw something out about Mecklenburg County, though, that might be different last time, because I don't know where Harris was from. But there are 50 precincts in Mecklenburg. They overlap over half of them with Bishop's state senate district. So he has some home field advantage that Harris may not have had in those suburbs and exurbs.
Can you get some out of the decision desk? What are the 50 precincts that are in? We are collecting precinct data tonight.
Well, there's only a few in it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Drew.
No, I was just gonna say I've put some notes in to see if we can get that file over there. I believe it's like 30 or 33 of the 50 precincts overlap with his district. So
Now, it's interesting that the early vote did not reflect that. In the early
right.
vote, McCready had, I believe, about a 6% advantage, maybe closer to 5.5 points relative to expectations. So it's interesting that that did not really materialize in the early vote. The early vote, Mecklenburg, from memory, Mecklenburg was about middle of the pack in terms of McCready's advantage.
Hey, so we've got someone over in Twitch asking us to look over at Cumberland and seeing how Bishop's gaining there. You want to comment on that a little bit, Alex?
I'm sorry?
We got some people asking us to look at Cumberland because of
Cumberland.
Bishop catching up over there. I mean, Cumberland, I mean, Bishop needs to get 47% there. He's at 46%. Looks like there's what?
Just over half.
Yeah, I mean, if we think it's our
half
mid
of
turnout, there's
election day
9,000
votes.
left. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the trend line's good for him there.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, that one's certainly right now. McCree's got a 0.79% vote goal advantage. That's probably going to be erased in the next 5 to 10,000 votes, which is roughly what we think is left. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly trending that way, despite Podcool saying that he'd buy some Democratic McCready shares.
Since you said it went from 27 up to 33, now we're steady at 29. So it's, I could have made a profit.
I mean, all the predictive people are just listening to us right now. We're totally true.
Podcool moves markets.
Yeah. Say that again, Drew.
I said Podcool moves markets.
That's right. Podcool move markets. Thank God this is an SEC involved. Yeah.
I was looking up Harris too, and his church was in Charlotte, so maybe some Mecklenburg home advantage, but probably not anything major from the area. It looked like he commuted out of the district.
Now, if I was the McCready camp, I'd be a little concerned about Richmond and Robeson. They're small, but they count, and he's definitely underperforming in those two areas so far. Richmond is almost all in. Robeson still has about 2/3 of the election day vote in, probably closer to maybe 1/6, 1/4, and 1/4 of the total vote left. So yeah, I'd be concerned about those two numbers. I would be happy with the Union performance thus far. I would be happy with the Anson performance, and then I would be nervously waiting for Mecklenburg to come.
I love it. The Twitch crowd has some interesting questions. The YouTube crowd's now debating whether or not these are actual results. Yes. Yes. I mean, they're mixed in with, the random numbers we throw out there. But yeah, actual results.
YouGov polling is 30% of people think that millions of illegal votes were cast in the 2016 and 2018 election. Both parties.
Both parties, yeah.
So it's a bipartisan. So a full third of the voters that believe that the election is hopelessly rigged, and nobody is doing anything about it. So
while we're waiting for some votes, Podcool, you want to go through kind of the DDHQ Optimist not an exit poll where we ask some questions around some of that stuff?
Yeah, so we conducted a not an exit poll. It was distinctly not an exit poll, but we wanted to take a little bit of a closer look at those who are in North Carolina 9. And so we surveyed over 800 registered voters in the district to see to ask them a bunch of questions. So one, we could see who they are, what's their demographic profile. Second, what are some of the major issues that they're looking at?
Walk them through, because I don't think they can see it on the screen. Walk them through what the graphics looks like.
Yeah, for sure. And so then we also have what their opinions are on Trump, and then what their opinions are on some policies. And so just to quickly go through the post, and this is on DecisionDeskHQ.com as well, if you want to take a closer look and check out some of the links. We have a look on who these voters are, and we found that an overwhelming majority of the voters are 55 years of age or older, and that's true for both Election Day voters as well as ABEV voters. On ABEV, looking at the actual file, we found that the median age was actually 59 years old of that ABEV crowd. And we found that the election day crowd is a little bit younger, but not by much. And so we're looking at these age categories. We also found that females make up a majority of our expected electorate in the election happening today, and that registered Democrats make up a plurality, especially when compared to Republicans and unaffiliated voters. We've been talking about the ABEV all night, so I'll kind of skip through this. We showed this a little earlier in the evening, but from when the period of time started during the ABEV, we found that Democrats, that is, voters who are registered in the Democratic Party, were outpacing those who are registered Republican and those who are unaffiliated voters throughout the entire time of the ABEV voting period. And so we've been tracking that, and that's why this evening we started and McCready was favored as soon as the ABEV results came out. And it's been trending in Bishop's direction, although we're still tracking to see where that's all going to land. We also looked at, just to kind of, we didn't talk about this earlier, so I'm going to skip some of the Trump factor, which we spoke about earlier in the evening. But we did find, so we're in a red district right now, where this is a district where Trump won the vote by 12 percentage points in 2016. And when we look at the district, we do find that it does lean right. So we asked voters, how would you describe your political views on a 5-point scale from very conservative to very progressive? And we found that that the plurality were very conservative, and a majority of the voters who are here, or about 46% of the district identify as conservative, whereas not that many are identifying as progressive. And interestingly, when we try to uncover the intensity of those positions, we find a majority of those who identify as conservative are very conservative, but that is not true on the progressive side. A majority of those who are progressive in the district identify as somewhat progressive, and so that's something interesting. When we just look at a few policy views, and then then we'll turn back to some of the results. When we look at the policy views, we actually found that support for Medicare for all was actually at net negative 22%. So this is a district where Medicare for all and single payer healthcare does not help.
We gotta cut you off. Let's go
Please.
back to the results. We got some more Mecklenburg in.
Yeah.
Can we
Let's
switch
do
this
it.
back to the thing? Mecklenburg just came in, which is what we're all waiting on.
So we
I
got
mean,
a
if
few
you
more precincts in there.
I mean, if you're listening in, based on Bishop's margins, I mean, I'm going to go on a limb and say probably the reason everyone's waiting to call this one is everyone's waiting for Mecklenburg now. I mean, Union is something that's still out there, but unless there's something wildly crazy, it's all going to come down to Mecklenburg, and we could see a call here soon.
Yeah, I would much rather be
Yeah.
Bishop right now. I think the Anson flip was big.
Yeah.
The fact that he's not holding his own in any of the rurals. Election day is big. Election day has been big for Republicans. And I don't know how much of that's the Trump rally or what they were doing in the last final weeks where they weren't spending as much, but they were trying to mobilize to get out the vote. But it has just been something that Republicans have just been consistently better at, while Democrats have been cannibalizing, and that's a big deal. So I think that's probably getting more into the weeds on like what consultants are looking at. But in terms of like what you can deliver, if you can deliver the early vote, but you're just eating up what was already going to show up, it's just not a good. It's not a good way to run an election.
Yeah. So there's now 2 counties that are fully in, Scotland and Anson. Anson had been looking good for McCready for most of the night. Election day was pretty bad for him there. Anson was the county in which McCready had the largest advantage in early votes, and now that it's 100% in, Bishop's relative advantage sits above 1%. Robeson and Richmond also have flipped as the vote has come in. those are pretty big relative advantages so far for Bishop. Cumberland's pretty close to even. Union's pretty close to even. So it would take a pretty big overperformance in Mecklenburg, I think, for
Hey
for
guys,
McCready here.
stand by for a call. Brandon's getting excited.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
and Richmond's in.
And Richmond's in. I mean, yeah, Brandon's getting pretty angry on the Discord. He wants us to quote him. Stand by for a call, but keep going.
Yeah, I don't think he's ready to call it yet.
He's just
Now he's having a little nervousness. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Richmond's in right now. Bishop is up 52-47. That's a flip. That was when McCready won with a
Yep.
bare majority in 2018. So that's a big win for the Republicans here to flip a district that McCready won with over 50% in 2018.
Yeah.
Hey, Drew, and tell me if you're focusing on something else. We're getting some people asking why our numbers are different than CNN and New York Times. Well, one is we don't have Scotland being won by, or Union being won by the Democrat. But do you want to speak to why our numbers are a little bit different than anyone else?
Yeah, it's just how we go about collecting it. We spend a lot of time understanding how these places report their votes, and we match our technology to do it. We don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. We know every state, every county, and in some places, every locality is different. And we do the homework. We do the legwork year-round. It's great to say, hey, look, we're doing an election night, and it's fun, and we're having a good time talking politics with a bunch of nerds. But this is something that's been going on for 3 months, 4 months. Preparing for it, understanding what the background is on this, understanding how to collect the votes and get them out as fast as possible.
Got it. So if you want to know what's going on at the decision desk right now, I mean, if for those of you figured out at home, I mean, this is all coming down to Mecklenburg. We're going to wait for a few more precincts out of Mecklenburg. It looks like, if Mecklenburg performs how we think it is, there's about 30,000 votes left. Somewhere between 15 and 30,000 votes left. So we see another 10 to 20,000 votes out of Mecklenburg. We're probably in the realm of being able to make a call. So the other counties, Scotland, Robertson, Union, they're performing on how we think they need to be for a Dan Bishop win. So let's see what Mecklenburg has, next 10 or 20,000 votes. I think we're getting close here. Does anyone have a counter opinion to this?
No.
Richmond is now 100% in. The final relative advantage there for Bishop is close to 4%. Robeson keeps getting better and better for Bishop as well. That overperformance is pretty brutal for McCready. And that's not a small county either. They had 30,000 votes in 2018, a little bit less than that obviously today. But yeah, those numbers are going to be tough for McCready to counter. He's holding his own in Union, but he's very, very slight advantage there in terms of relative performance. I've been talking a lot about relative performance. On the screen, we've got the right-hand side, which is the actual result. On the left-hand side is somewhat of a nuanced way of looking at these results. Instead of caring about what the top line is, who currently has more votes more votes. It more so looks at based on the counties, based off of past performance, based off of how each candidate is expected to perform at the county level, which candidate is doing well. So in other words, in Union County, the reason I say that McCready is holding his own, even though he's down 40% to 60%, is because we were expecting that if he could get to 40% there, he would be in pretty good shape for the night.
Hey, so our decision desk just went over the wire. We need a lawyer who's barred in North Carolina to look at recount territory. So if we happen to have a barred lawyer from North Carolina on the desk tonight. So what is recount territory in North Carolina?
1%.
Barred lawyer. 1%.
1%. They have to file for it by Thursday, so they'll have a day or so to kind of look at it. That causes an automatic machine recount. If that changes the result, The loser of that change can then request a hand recount. If it doesn't change the results, the loser in that situation can request a hand recount. They'll then do a limited hand recount. If that looks substantially different from the machine recount, they'll go through with a full hand recount. And so it's a potentially long and arduous process, but it just starts with that this thing is within 1%.
Got it. That's why you went to law school.
Yeah,
For that.
my entire degree right there.
Yeah. Hard lawyer.
Now, if we've reached just waiting for like Meg to come in, I just want to like pitch a question. I'm curious with the panel. This is your result. Like we assume it's going to be close to this. If you're the parties, do you spend here again in 2020?
So I think
Real quick before we answer that question, there's a little bit of chatter. I'm getting texts and something on Twitter that there's some counting problems in Mecklenburg. So cue the conspiracy theorists.
Was it
You
the
know,
wet balance, the wet
Yeah.
Lamont balance?
People are going to go straight to, okay, counting problems, all these votes are void. That's probably not the case. It probably has something to do. I hesitate to speculate, but that's what everyone's hearing. We haven't confirmed that yet. Drew, if you hear anything from the decision desk, because we are in contact with Mecklenburg County, with people scraping and as well as talking to county officials there. So if we get anything, we'll let anyone know. But right now we're expecting to hear the votes as they come in. And anyway, so the question from Noah was, do we think they should be spending money in this district going into 2020? What do you think, the Alexes?
So I think the answer is they will. I think if Bishop wins, he's in pretty good shape for re-election.
So if you're the Democrats, you wouldn't spend here.
Kind of depends on the national environment. You know, it would. You had 2018, which was a very, very close race in a very democratic environment. You have 2019 now, where it looks like, you know, it could basically be a repeat where the Republican ekes out a victory, potentially. 2020 would have to be a strong Democratic year, I think, or Bishop, you know, having some scandals, etc., for me to think that there's a legitimate chance at him losing. Now, obviously, there's a lot of recession talk, and a lot of things can change between now and 2020. But 2018 was a pretty strong Democratic environment, and that's why this district was competitive in 2018. So, you know, Bishop wins with incumbency advantage, although, you know, incumbency advantage nowadays is not very high in the House. I think he'd be in pretty good shape. What do you think, Alex? Which, by the way, Paige Rasmussen, who I think is your biggest fan, wants you to speak up more. Wants you to speak up more.
All right. Okay. Well, I think it sort of goes back to one of Noah's earlier points on just the spending and the allocation of resources and what they're really trying to do here. And I don't know. And the incumbency advantage is a good point, and it was based on a retirement. So this is what Noah was talking about before, where like maybe we should be talking about the Will Hurd retirement instead of this special election, just in terms of trying to understand the balance of power in the House. And maybe I'm taking his words and spinning them a little bit, but I think I mean overall, like we're here right now because of, well, it wasn't a planned retirement, but it was Pittenger lost his primary to Harris. And that's the reason why we're here. Now, if we try and speculate in a world where Harris lost the primary to Pittenger in 2018, then would Pittenger been able to hold on this seat in the 2018 midterm? And then would we even be having this conversation in the first place? So I think this is a big place where I think if Bishop could pull off the win tonight, then I don't think Democrats are going to be coming back and spending resources here. I think they'd rather spend it in a place that isn't a Trump plus 12 district.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that the electorate's going to be very different next year. It's going to be much more Republican friendly in some of the outlying counties. You also have a Senate race, so he's going to benefit from some up ballot spending to turn out these areas.
Yeah, and an interesting note here is that there is a sizable gap between Trump favorability in this district um, and this ballot test here. By all accounts, Trump is still either even or above water in this district. Actually, is above water in this district by more than what Bishop might win by tonight, or Harris won with an asterisk in 2018 by. So with Trump on the ballot, that should, in theory, boost up the Republican in 2020.
Got it.
Where the DCCC is going to spend their money, they're looking at a lot of freshmen that won Trump districts or flipped Trump districts that are pretty vulnerable. There's going to be a lot of hue and cry for attention and money there to hold those, suburban flip districts that they got. This one probably slides down that scale.
Guys, a note from Brandon at the decision desk on a precinct by precinct look at Mecklenburg, the crucial Mecklenburg County. We have an improved R showing on election day. So that's exactly that's basically exactly what Bishop needed to get out of Mecklenburg so he could win. We knew he was going to come in behind on early vote, and we needed to see him have a big day in Union and Mecklenburg on election day voting and a precinct analysis, which is something we collect and probably reporting on later this year. GOP's doing all right. So again, we'd rather be Dan Bishop than McCready at this point. Not ready to call it, but it's coming.
So precinct number 69, for instance, it went to McCready early, 567 votes to 354, but election day actually has Bishop up very slightly, 492 to 459.
Hey, we got our precinct map ready. Where's the precinct map, Austin? Didn't fucking get the precinct map. We'll have to have it next time.
Is that the first F-bomb of the night?
First F-bomb of the night. I don't know. It's after 10 o'clock somewhere.
But not North Carolina.
But not North Carolina.
North Carolina.
How do we drop the ball on not having the precinct map? Killing me.
In other North Carolina news,
Hey, it looks like we just got a big jump here. We got 27 precincts in now from Mecklenburg, so that's a pretty substantial hit here to check out these numbers.
Yep.
Also, Union's fully in now. Yeah, we got a lot big hit here.
Union is fully in. All right.
Wow. Union's fully in. So, I mean, if Union's fully in, once we get that updated on the sheet, in fact, can you scroll over? Let's see where that is on the vote goals. Because if it's fully in, if you're Bishop, you needed to pick up anher half point to meet your vote goal.
I'm not seeing it on my screen yet.
19% of the election day vote, which is way above what he needed before.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him on my screen yet.
Yeah, it just updated the.
What the hell is Shore doing?
Just got it. So he's up barely under 60, but still a 20-point win. So about where he was in the 2018 election, where if he's outperforming in the rurals, McCready really needs like a couple point over performance in Mecklenburg.
More than that, I think, because he's significantly underperforming in Richmond and Robeson. He decently underperformed in Anson. I think he would need to overperform by, at least 2 points in Mecklenburg. And it sounds like on a precinct by precinct level, he's not necessarily doing that on election day. That's going to be kind of rough.
We're just waiting for this because it's Mecklenburg. I mean, it's all coming down to Mecklenburg. So where are we seeing this stuff come in?
All right, looks like, I've got it up on my screen now as well.
Okay, now Twitter is telling us we should drink more. Noah's drinking like 3-4 beers here, which is great because he's gonna be doing maps later on. The rest of us actually have to do math in about 12 hours, but we promise next time, especially if we get a drink sponsor, that'd be really great if we got a drink sponsor.
Noah's the Mecklenburg County of drinking.
Yeah. We promise to drink on the next round, but we'll drink ahead of time. Maybe we should like do a drinking game for this.
Pre-game.
Yeah. What's next, Drew? What's the next? We got Kentucky next, right?
No. Louisiana on a Saturday.
Louisiana.
Louisiana governor on a Saturday. That's party time, kids.
We're gonna drink some Margs. Yeah.
Some hurricanes.
Yeah.
It'll be Mardi Gras for elections.
Yeah. Definitely drink. All right, switch over for a second while we're waiting for Mecklenburg to come in. I mean, there's nothing really worth looking at other than Mecklenburg at this point. Let's see what we predicted. If people figured out and predicted
Is this
that.
some like a state ledge race in upstate South Carolina or something? It feels like we get one of those. Like
I know, right? Yeah. Let's see. Where's predicted at? Yeah, I mean, Predicted's pretty much betting on Dan Bishop at this point. You can buy the GOP candidate winning about 87%, which is pretty much baked in and predicted.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're just waiting here.
If I had known this live chat would have moved markets, I would have put something in.
Oh, acting innocent, like you didn't know. The 14 people listening to us right now, 6 of which are bots, weren't influential. I mean, just to recap, kind of what we're hearing from Brandon in the decision desk is on a precinct by precinct basis in the county of Mecklenburg for election day vote. So I'll say that again, on a precinct to precinct basis on election day vote in Mecklenburg County, Dan Bishop has outperformed where he needed to outperform. We're not expecting him to win the county of Mecklenburg, but that is the county with the most votes. And so if he can overperform, but not necessarily win that county, and continue his trend of hitting his vote goals in other counties, this is going to be a good night for him. That's why you don't hear us talking a whole lot about Bladen or Cumberland or some of these other counties. Yes, there's votes out there, but really Mecklenburg has the votes left that can steer it either way. And right now it's trending Dan Bishop.
Yeah, sometimes in politics, it's not necessarily about winning an area; it's about losing it at the right number, and that's what McCready's managing to do.
Look, the governor, or the Senate primary barely has anyone. He can just like pull a John Ossoff or whatever, and McCready can just announce that he's running for Senate and go nonstop forever.
Yeah, if you guys want deep nerdery, our decision desk, not the ephemeral one, needs to see about half a dozen to 10 more precincts go the way they have been going for Bishop, and we're probably ready to call it. So it's coming soon. Keep an eye out for it.
Sure, looks like you accidentally put in McCready's number for Bishop and Bishop's number for McCready in Union. We made fun of New York Times for flipping Union.
Yeah.
Now made the same error.
The unnamed intern we have entering in numbers on the spreadsheet will be flogged later on.
Not the official vote total that goes out.
The official vote total. The official vote total's on the right of your screen. The worksheet's for everyone else. Yeah, and then that intern will be flogged later.
Actually, I mean, this is like the second time though that. Sorry to completely divert into a separate thing, but that a special election has said that third-party candidates would get 3%, and then they barely register. And I kind of have to wonder if like pollsters should be a bit more wary going into the cycle, looking at people who say they'll show up for third party, at least for these special elections where there's nothing else on the ticket, and it's not just a protest vote, and whether they really have to drill down into their vote intention. Because the fact that some of them were so 3 or 4% and it's at 0.6% is like a huge difference if your race was 46 with 4% third party versus what the results are. And so I think you really have to confirm that these are voters that will show up. And that's just something as like a pollster that I'm just like more concerned about that there are these more like trolling voters. I know that the crosstabs for the non-exit poll had 6% of 18 to 34-year-olds saying that they were voting libertarian, which maybe if they didn't show up, it's a small percentage. But something like that, like I think just as the industry looks, needs to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we do pay interns for those of you asking on the We do pay interns.
And I was just given a 6-pack, so like the intern's being treated nicely comparatively.
Yeah.
Do interns also get docked when they transpose on the contract, or do you need a barred lawyer for that?
So someone was asking if there's a pathway for McCready. So let's dabble in fantasy here for a moment. Let's scroll down. How many votes do we think? We roughly think, again, this isn't exact.
And we're not going to actually get to this number.
And we're not going to get to this number. We think there's probably about 37,000 votes left. And currently Bishop is up by about,
Let's see,
call it 3,000 votes. I'm rounding up.
Union. So Union.
I mean, McCready'd
got,
have to take. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean Union got pretty close to the mid range estimate. So yeah, we're probably looking at maybe about 30,000 votes left. In Mecklenburg County, we're probably looking at maybe 12 to 15,000 votes left. McCready would have to rack up a pretty sizable percent of the vote there, and
If
so
it sounds
far,
like we're reaching to figure out a scenario, we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically you would have to see an early vote-like performance in Mecklenburg for the rest of the precincts that are out there, and so far there's no evidence that he can hold that sort of margin.
I mean, the Mecklenburg's over half in terms of day of precinct. So, why would there be that kind of switch is the kind of question you're asking yourself, and it's just not.
Yeah. Another sort of telltale sign. So in our little relative advantage metric here, you see that every single county now that is over 60% counted of election day votes, you have Bishop overperforming his benchmarks. The 3 counties that are less than 60% counted, McCready still has an advantage in. We'll see if he can hold on to the Bladen and Mecklenburg advantage. Cumberland seems unlikely that he'd be able to hold on to that. So yeah, there's this sheet is sort of doing its job as the night has gone on. We expected it to go from blue to red. The question was, to what extent, and it's gone pretty heavily. It'll be interesting to see after the fact what the split is on election day versus early voting. It seems like election day has been stronger for Bishop than maybe expected.
And this really is a good look behind the curtain, right? Because if you're just looking at this, you say, wow, 2,500 votes, that's not a huge number, right? That's doable. But it really comes down to knowing the trends that's happened throughout the course of the night and where the votes are left. And it becomes really hard at a certain point to find 2,500 votes. Even if, you're looking at it and say, well, there's still, 19% of the precincts out. These numbers and these percentages seem small, but they're really big when you're actually trying to overcome them. It gets very hard. If Mecklenburg hadn't come in yet and he's up by or down by 2,500, oh yeah, it's a whole different ballgame. But the playing field just starts to shrink and shrink and shrink, and that's what Brandon and his team are looking at when they make the calls. Is there a way that the candidates behind to find the votes to come back? And you hear the discussion on this, and there's just not, especially when you understand what you're looking for in doing the prep work. You understand the absentee and early voting. You understand the day of. You have the basic data going back to understand what the splits were the last time there was an election. When you see a flip like this, you're like, as you heard them talking about, where's that miracle going to come from? If he's, losing day of by 3-4%, why is McCready going to start winning it by 7 or 8% suddenly? There's just no logic to that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We've gotten some questions about turnout in some of, this is a high-end race. Throw up, since we're waiting for some votes, throw up some of the spend stats that Noah put together. For an election that's going to have roughly 200,000 people showing up, I mean, the spend was roughly what? That's the TV spend, just the overall
Yeah.
spend. I mean, what? NRCC 2.6 million,
Yeah.
Congressional Leadership Fund 2.2
This is a
million.
big win. If
Yeah.
you really commit, and like even with outside groups, you were still spending. The GOP was still spending about 2 million more.
Yeah.
If you're spending 2 million more and you're winning a close race like that, this is a big win for the GOP outside groups that can tap that. They really probably held the difference. Baker McCready went on the air alone. With the more money and with some of the outside groups backing him, and had pulled it off. It would have been a big deal. $3 million is a lot of ads, where you can do a lot of damage if you just blanket the airways. I think you can see some of the like eastern counties doing better for Bishop too, where it's Trump's rally out in Cumberland County in Fayetteville. Could have also been a big deal, the fact that he's doing better there, but not as much overperforming benchmarks in Union or Mac. And so like stuff like Richmond flipping, things like that are big, but in a race this close, the little things really make a difference. So I think it's still close, and the narrative will still be, well, this is close, and a lot of the representatives will.
Hey, we just got another big dump here. We're up to 86%. We're also up to 38 of 50 in Mecklenburg. So this might tell the story here.
Hey, switch it up. Yeah, we just dumped a lot of precincts. Okay. Give us a second. We'll all take a look at this.
Yeah, so overall, we're at 38 of 50 precincts in Mecklenburg, and McCready's at 56.4%. Bishop's at just under 43%.
So again, day of is really coming through for him because he was close. That was closer to 60-40 before that, right?
I mean, it's been continuing the day of trend. He's been getting his day of trend pretty well. And as noted before, he represents some of those Mecklenburg precincts. So, I mean, another dump comes in. We think there's roughly 10 to 20,000 votes left in Mecklenburg. I mean, that's got to about shut the door for McCready.
Yeah.
We're currently trying to locate Brandon so we can
He's doing the final math so he can make sure.
so we can make it official.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't even figure out, short of them like rolling votes back, I don't see this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just not enough votes left.
Maybe some vote fraud. Maybe that would do it.
Yeah, vote fraud.
Yikes.
It's not like this district has a history of any of that kind of stuff, does it?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe it was still alleged.
Yeah.
Has anyone checked King County for any?
Yeah, it's not fraud, it's election tampering.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Mecklenburg's advantage just dipped under 2%.
Yeah.
Relative advantage.
So now, what's the media spin going to be? Let's say Bishop. We haven't yet called it for Bishop, but let's say Bishop wins by under 2 points. What's the media spin? Does Trump get to walk away?
Alex Eisenstadt of Politico writes a thing where all of his previous sources that have been whining to him for the past 2 weeks breathe a sigh of relief. And then there's another retirement of like Mac Thornberry, which is just a guy who lost a gavel or something like that in like a few days, and then that just turns into like more of that same narrative. I don't know. I don't think PA 18 really changed the narrative that much, and I'm really skeptical that any story lasts in the public consciousness for more than 2 or 3 days. Which is a super cynical view.
What about if McCready would have won?
All right, hey guys, we have the official call.
Well, we got a call.
We've made the call. Dan Bishop is projected the winner of the North Carolina 9 special election.
And there we have it.
It is over. Has anyone else called it, Drew?
Representative-elect.
I don't think AP's called it yet. I don't even know if Edison's covering this one.
Yeah, no, they have not called it at the
CNN
AP.
called it. CNN hasn't called it.
Yeah, McCready's
Yeah.
just not doing well enough in election day to make up for Bishop's overperformance in some of these rural counties.
Yeah.
Margin's just about 2% right now.
So I mean, if everyone wants to stay up and see what's left, it's a one per, or, try and play the next game. It's whether there's going to be a recount, and we haven't have a barred lawyer from North Carolina here.
Mhm.
Someone thinks you're worth $400 an hour, dude.
Yeah, I'm kind of stunned by that. I'll take that.
That's about $450 too much.
Ruined me.
Is it an automatic recount?
So it is a mandatory recount.
Mandatory.
Under 1%. Yeah.
Under 1%.
It doesn't look like it's going to be under 1%.
Yeah. Now there
Yeah.
is technically a discretionary recount, but that is only instituted by the Division of Elections there, and I don't think that'll come into play in this case. So it's got to get under that 1%.
Yep.
And right now it's a 2%. So with 87% of the election day precincts in.
Yep.
And trending towards Bishop. I mean, again, you're just imagining a reversal because reasons. There just aren't. I see it looks like Dave Wasserman, doing it on his own out there, just called it. Still just checking. New York Times doesn't have it from the AP yet. But yeah, that was definitely the call.
No. I mean, I think this is a good word of caution, looking at least in the immediate future for 2020 on trying to overanalyze the early vote. A lot of the people that really back looking at the early vote breakdown and intention and stuff are a lot of times using past vote, but as it grows, and as it grows especially one-sided, is something to look for that you have to keep this in mind until early voting becomes more pervasive on a bipartisanship basis. And as long as it keep leaning more Democrat as it comes in, it's not as useful as it was in the past, and it was a smaller share, and that it was more easily corroborated with non-exit polling.
Yeah, the theory was it would expand the voter pool, and it just doesn't seem to have done that. The advocates for this saying, hey, you have to do this, it's going to get more people involved in the process, you bring in all these new voters. It just rearranges the deck. People are people. They have their proclivities and their interests, and it may be great in terms of, well, it's convenient, but there are just people who are committed to voting and people who just aren't interested in it. And there may not be much marketing and political operatives can do about that.
Robeson's now 100% in. Cumberland, as predicted.
Wow, did Cumberland flip?
Yeah, Cumberland flipped completely. Not even just relative advantage, actually flipped. So that's two counties that flipped.
Robeson barely a majority win.
Yep. And it looks like we're waiting on Bladen, infamous Bladen County, and Mecklenburg. Those are the only two counties left. 12 precincts in Mecklenburg and 5 in Bladen.
I don't know. So if we ever figure out who the deep voice guy is, if you want to read the phone book or something, keep your fans happy. Any final thoughts? I mean, this is this will be the Republicans will have the talking points. I'm sure President Trump will be tweeting about this, and we may hear 2 or 3 times about the rally last night. And fair play, it may have helped.
Yeah.
They just don't fly the president around just for fun. There's research and there's understanding about why and how to utilize that, and it paid off.
Yeah.
Hey, pull up the crosstabs. We actually asked that question in our not exit poll. What did the president have an effect on those people who voted? Let's pull it up. Give us a second here. We'll pull up the crosstabs.
And on the crosstab, here's on the top one.
Yeah.
The crosstab.
Oh.
There.
Yeah. You only got top lines there.
Send it
Yeah,
over.
so
We'll pull
what-
it up in a second, or read it off.
So Scott, what are we looking for?
We asked a question on Trump, on whether it affected the voters in North Carolina 9. What was the breakdown of that?
Yeah, we had a few Trump questions. I mean, one of them was we asked if the 2020 presidential election were held today, if you'd go for Republican Donald Trump or a generic Democratic challenger, and we had Trump up a few points. Alex, if you want to pull up the top lines, we could at least follow along there.
Yeah.
We had Trump up a few points. He lost among the Democratic challenger won among females and Trump won among males. So we had a gender gap there. But if we look at if we break it out by counties, if we look at Mecklenburg, actually the Democratic challenger won
Send him the top
there.
lines so we can put those up.
The crosstabs.
I'm sorry, the crosstabs. Send him the crosstabs.
That'll take us a couple minutes here.
That's fine. Just email it to him and we'll show him.
Alex, what question would you like me to put up here?
Put up the Trump question.
Just email the crosstabs. I got him.
I believe we're still here. Just pulling up some numbers, correct?
Pull it up.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, we weren't planning on going this in the weeds, but
Well, now we're into the post-game show. The after hours.
yeah, so here we have if the 2020 presidential election were being held today, would you vote for Trump, Democratic challenger, someone else, or would you not vote? And we had Donald Trump at 49.5% compared to a generic Democratic challenger 42.7%. I'd interpret this with a bit of a grain of salt here, just because we're talking about Donald Trump, a person who the district knows well, versus a generic Democrat who we still don't know who it is. However, considering all of that, it was still a 49.5 to 42.7. That cuts into what Trump's victory was in 2016 rather substantially. But among the special election voters that went to the polls during ABEV and again today, Trump was still in the lead. And then if we look at the question right below that, we also asked respondents if they believe the House of Representatives should impeach Donald Trump. And at no, do not impeach President Trump, we were at 57.2. And this more or less reflects what the national trend was. Recently, there was a USA Today Suffolk poll, and I believe it was at 56, 57, somewhere around 56 or 57% as well on do not impeach. And so Trump is doing pretty well. Again, I will highlight what we said at the top of the show. If we look at the blog piece, we do see that we asked voters, will you vote in this election to express support for Donald Trump, to express opposition to Donald Trump, or was Trump not a factor? And for about 30% of respondents, Trump was not a factor, and the slight plurality were expressing support for the president. And so we're definitely going to hear over the next few, I guess, minutes and maybe the next few days or so from the press that this was an overwhelming victory for the president, and then some of the election nerds on Twitter will come out and say, well, actually, compared to the overall vote share, and then if we look at where Bishop was supposed to perform in the 2019 election, it was actually a bad night for Trump. We're here to say, bear in mind that, well, that 30% of all the respondents said Trump was really not a factor. And so even though that might be a simple explanation to understand the results, it may not be the correct one.
When it comes to this kind of stuff, I think the simplest explanation is probably the best explanation. And you had an election in 2018 where, the national environment, the generic ballot for Congress was heavily skewed towards the Democrats. And in that sort of environment, you had an open field, you had the Republican, basically tie, eke out a victory, whatever, however you want to call it. Now you're, a year later, and if you look at the generic ballot now, it's still a Democratic advantage. It's slightly less Democratic than it was last year. And you have the same district, you have an open field, Republican and Democrat. And what happens? Well, the Republican wins by a little bit more than they did in 2018. I think that's pretty straightforward. The generic ballot moved slightly towards Republicans. This district moved slightly towards Republicans. It's still a very Democratic environment on the whole.
I think we're wrapped up, Drew, unless you got anything else you wanted to cover. Drew already left. Drew's like, fuck it, I'm done.
Number 2.
Travis. Drew, are you watching soccer right now? Are you that bored?
No, I'm sitting here in trance, and actually, I do agree with that. It's just the environment's moved, but I'm a big believer candidates matter. All this ballot testing now is great. It's interesting, but there's going to be a campaign. Trump's not running against a generic Democrat. They're going to have policies. They're going to have campaigns. So we'll see what happens when we get there.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, we're gonna go ahead. If you guys, obviously, thanks for watching.
Hold on, we're gonna try to get
Quick
Brandon.
shout out to Max Littman.
We're gonna try to get Brandon to say one final word. Austin, can you get Brandon a link? He's clamoring to talk.
There's
He's
like,
ready to say something.
yeah. I mean, not bad. We averaged 1,000 people watching this the entire night. Thank you. Weirdly.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, thanks for sticking.
We don't know what poor life choices brought you here, but we appreciate it.
Given the poor production quality and stage direction, thank you for continuing to watch. We promise it'll be better next time. It's going to be easy to be better.
Brandon, click the link. Well, I don't know if he's listening, but Brandon, if you are listening, click the link in your email. I promise it's not a spam. It's not a phishing.
I'm still, the infrastructure stayed up, so we're good. That was a good night.
I actually didn't email it to him.
Just send me the link. Someone send me the link.
Come on, Brandon.
You guys, we have 14 ways to communicate. You guys are emailing each other.
That's what I'm saying.
What am I doing here?
Don't know.
This better be some quality content from Finnegan.
Ever.
There's still 400 people listening. We're not even
Don't make me
doing
start
anything.
talking.
Brandon has something very, very important to say. We will see what it is.
Yeah.
in
I'll start
just a
talking.
second. Oh,
Oh,
Someone let him in.
oh,
That's you, Austin.
what are you doing?
Austin, let him in.
I don't see anyone in here.
Should get a permission.
Oh man, this is getting.
Check your email also.
But let me tell you how sweet everything worked tonight. Very excited.
The tech guy's happy, so we're all happy.
Yeah.
Woo!
Live look from the Bishop Victory Party.
But I mean, the reality is, yes, it's a little loose on the production values, and we're having a good time. But this is what we're trying to do: is one, give people a look behind the curtain at how this works. It's not just being told to you and spoon fed. And also, we want to bring different things to elections. As you can tell, we enjoy elections, and they're fun. And so we're going to keep finding different ways to to talk about them. But the main thing is what we did tonight, which was accurate and fast on the returns and then on the call, because we do bring a lot of different things. It's not a guessing game. There's a lot of work that goes into making each and every one of these calls.
Lots of computers. Let me tell you about the computers.
Oh, God.
So many computers. Very large.
We're just clicking on things on board. We got.
Bra- Brandon, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get you in.
Just imagine he said something very witty and funny, and we'll call it a night.
Everybody can laugh at it.
All
so-
right, yeah. Thanks for everyone watching. We'll be back for Louisiana. We'll have more things to talk about. With that, Austin, go ahead and kill it.
Woo. Good night.
Everyone.
Let's not act like that telestrator worked the whole time.